There are 3 things Clara Hastings never imagined she would do in life: get her hands dirty, wake up before the chickens, much less marry a rancher who had the audacity to call her dollface while his boots tracked mud across the living room rug. But there she was, about to discover that sometimes fate has a sharper sense of humor than her own tongue, and that was saying something. If you love romance stories with lots of humor and sharp wit, leave a like and subscribe to the CY channel. This story will win you over. Helena, Montana, 1932. The July heat hung over the city, turning Mr. Hastings' office into a kind of luxurious greenhouse where only pride seemed to prosper. Clara was seated in a dark green velvet armchair, her back as straight as if she had swallowed a yardstick, her blue eyes flashing with enough indignation to set the curtains on fire. "No," she said, and the word came out so sharp it could have cracked the crystal decanter on the table. Absolutely not. Mr. Hastings, a man who had built a mining empire with his own hands and who didn't flinch even when copper prices plummeted, adjusted his glasses with the patience of someone dealing with unstable dynamite. "Clara, you have refused 17 suitors in the last 2 years. 19, she corrected, lifting her chin, and all had excellent reasons to be refused. The last one chewed with his mouth open and believed that philosophy was a contagious disease. You cannot spend your life turning away men because they don't meet your list of preposterous demands." Preposterous? Clara rose with a dramatic flourish that would make any Broadway actress envious. "Father, one of them collected fingernails. Fingernails. He kept them in a jar as if they were rare coins." Mr. Hastings sighed, the kind of sigh that carried 20 years of tested patience. "Levi Dawson doesn't collect fingernails. He's an honest, hard-working man, owner of productive land in Alder Ridge. He inherited the ranch young, rebuilt it with his own hands after difficult years, and has an impeccable reputation in the region." "How marvelous," Clara retorted, crossing her arms. "A rancher. Father, I speak 3 languages, play the piano, and have organized charity drives that raise thousands of dollars. And you want to trade me for cows and chickens? I'm not trading you for anything. I'm trying to save you from yourself." "Saving?" Clara's voice rose an octave. "This is an exile. It's medieval punishment. Next you'll send me to a convent. If there were a convent that would take someone with your sharp tongue, I would have already considered it." Clara opened her mouth to reply, but her father raised a hand. "Before you start another dramatic speech, let me present the alternative." Something in his voice made Clara pause. There was a tone there, a kind of dangerous satisfaction she recognized well. "What alternative?" she asked, wary. "Mr. Arthur Pemberton arrived from London last month. He is looking for an American wife and has shown interest in you." The name dropped into the room like a malodorous corpse. Clara felt her stomach turn. "Mr. Pemberton?" Her voice was strangled. That man who spits tobacco on any available surface? Who eats like a starving pig and exudes a smell reminiscent of sun-fermented manure? The same. He has a title, considerable fortune, and doesn't mind wives who have strong opinions. Mainly because he's deaf in one ear and generally ignores what women say. Clara looked at her father with genuine horror. "This is blackmail." "I prefer to call it a necessary push," Mr. Hastings said, and there was an almost amused glint in his eyes. "You have until tomorrow to decide. Levi Dawson or Mr. Arthur. Choose wisely." "What if I run away to Europe?" Clara played her last card with theatrical despair. "I have friends in Paris who would welcome me with open arms." Her father smiled. It was the kind of smile a poker player gives when he holds the winning hand. "With what money, dear? I cut off your access to credit yesterday. You have exactly $37 in your personal account. Hardly enough for the fare to Great Falls." Clara sank back into the armchair, defeated for the first time in her life. Her father, the man she had always managed to manipulate with charm and strategic tears, had finally found the perfect leverage. "You are cruel," she accused, but her voice lacked conviction. "I am practical," he corrected, returning his attention to the papers on the desk. "And you, my daughter, are as stubborn as a stuck mule. But even mules learn when the path gets too narrow." Clara didn't answer. She stayed there, looking out the window at the mountains in the distance. trying to imagine what her life would be like trapped on a ranch, married to a man who probably didn't even know how to properly hold a teacup. A rancher, she thought contemptuously. He probably has manure on his boots and talks to animals. She had no idea how right and how wrong she was. The dining room in the Hastings mansion was set as if to receive a foreign dignitary. Clara had insisted on it. If she was going to be forced to meet that rancher, it would at least be on territory where she had the advantage. The polished mahogany table gleamed under the crystal chandelier, the silver was immaculate, and the aroma of the roast prepared by the cook wafted through the air with an almost offensive refinement. Clara had chosen her dress with strategic care. Light blue, elegant cut that emphasized her slender waist, pearls at her neck. She was beautiful and she knew it. It was her armor. Martha, the housekeeper who had practically raised her, was making the final adjustments to the table when Clara entered. "Are you nervous, miss?" Martha asked with that tone she had used since Clara was 6 and stole cookies from the kitchen. Nervous? Clara adjusted a flower in the centerpiece with more force than necessary. "Why would I be nervous? It's just dinner with the man my father decided I'm going to marry, against my will, breaking all modern principles of female liberty." "Then you are terrified," Martha translated, hiding a smile. "I am furious. It's different." "Of course it is, dear." The sound of the front door opening echoed down the hall, followed by Mr. Hastings' deep voice greeting someone. Clara felt her stomach clench. She squared her shoulders, lifted her chin, and prepared her coldest expression. "Let the rustic rancher come. I shall demolish him with elegance." Then Levi Dawson walked into the room. Clara felt her resolve falter for a treacherous moment. He was not what she expected. Tall, truly tall, she would have to raise her chin considerably to look him in the eye, with shoulders that looked capable of carrying an ox. Dark hair, slightly messy, as if he had recently run his fingers through it, a well-kept beard that framed an almost offensively masculine jaw, and his eyes, brown with golden flecks like whiskey under lamplight, fixed on her with an intensity that made something strange happen in her stomach. For a second, just one treacherous second, Clara realized he was attractive, not in the polished, cultivated way of the men of Helena, but in a way more primitive, solid, real. But then she noticed the boots, work boots clearly well cared for but with undeniable traces of field use, on the precious Persian rug. "Focus, Clara. He is a peasant with dirty boots." Levi stopped at the entrance to the room, and a slow smile formed on his face. It wasn't a nervous smile or one trying to impress. It was the smile of someone amused by a private joke. And then his eyes swept over her, not disrespectfully, but with a clear appreciation that made heat rush up Clara's neck. He was assessing her in the same way she had assessed him moments earlier. "So you're the bride who comes with the deed and all," he said, his voice deep with a rural drawl that dragged the words like molasses over stone. "Seems like a fair deal." The silence that followed was so thick it could have been cut with the fish knife on the table. Clara felt the blood rush to her face. Deed. Had he just compared her to property? "And you," she countered, every word articulated with surgical precision, "are the rancher who needs a wife by contract. Must be difficult to get one through conventional means." Martha discreetly choked behind her. Mr. Hastings cleared his throat in a clear warning. "But Levi?" Levi laughed. A genuine laugh, the kind that comes from the chest and transforms the entire face. Clara hated noticing that the laugh made him even more attractive. "Conventional?" He strode into the room with the confidence of someone on his own territory, not a guest. "I prefer to call it efficient. I don't have time to dance around young ladies who faint at the sight of a chicken." "Lucky me," Clara retorted, squeezing her skirt hard enough to wrinkle the fabric. "Because I never faint. Especially not in the face of such ridiculous situations." "Good. Because where I'm taking you, ridiculous is the least of it. There's hard work, dirty land, and animals that don't care if you speak French or not. I also speak, Italian and German." Clara lifted her chin. "But I suspect your chickens don't care about that either." "My chickens have more practical sense than half the people I know," Levi said, taking the chair Mr. Hastings indicated with a familiarity that made Clara grit her teeth. "At least they know that eggs don't appear magically on the breakfast table." Martha quickly turned away to hide her laughter, pretending to adjust the curtains. Clara sat down with the posture of an offended queen, every movement calculated to demonstrate superiority. Levi settled into the chair across from her with the relaxation of someone accustomed to much simpler furniture, and didn't care. Mr. Hastings watched the exchange with an unreadable expression, but Clara swore she saw a flicker of satisfaction in his eyes. He's enjoying this, she realized in horror. He thinks this rustic man is good for me. Dinner was served, and for a few minutes the only sound was the discreet clinking of silverware. Clara ate with studied delicacy, small bites, perfect chewing. Levi ate with efficiency, not crudely, but also without any affectation, and Clara couldn't stop watching him discreetly. His large calloused hands that held the cutlery firmly, the way his shoulders filled out the jacket, clearly the best he owned, but still simple. The strong cut of his jaw when he chewed. He was so present, so solid and real compared to the perfumed, pompous men she knew in... Helena, stop that, she mentally scolded herself. He's a rustic rancher who compared you to property. Martha, Levi suddenly said, turning to the housekeeper supervising the service. This meat is exceptional. Perfect seasoning. Did you prepare it? Martha looked genuinely surprised by the attention. No, sir, it was our cook, Mrs. O'Brien, but I helped with the vegetables. Then I need to compliment your carrots specifically. They have that touch of honey, but not too sweet. Martha blushed slightly, something Clara hadn't seen in years. You have a refined palate for a... Martha paused, searching for words. For a man who spends the day in the fields? Levi smiled. My mother was a great cook. She taught me that good food deserves recognition, no matter who makes it or where it's served. Clara felt a strange pang. It wasn't quite jealousy of Martha receiving compliments. It was more the uncomfortable realization that Levi Dawson was not the ignorant brute she expected. He had manners. He knew how to appreciate work. He spoke of his mother with obvious affection. This irritated her more than it should have. It is rare, Clara said, unable to keep quiet, to find someone who recognizes the invisible work of the household. Most men don't notice such things. Levi put down his cutlery and looked directly at her. It was a gaze that seemed to pierce her defenses like water through a sieve, and there was something in his eyes, genuine. Interest, challenge, and something warmer that she didn't want to name. Miss Hastings, I plant, I harvest, I fix fences. I tend to sick animals in the middle of the night, and I even prepare my own food when needed. Nothing that keeps a home running is invisible to me. Invisible is a luxury for people who have never had to lift a finger. The silence returned, but it was different, tense, electric. Clara felt as if she had been challenged in a way she had never experienced. It wasn't a direct insult. It was worse. It was the truth wrapped in casual observation, and the way he looked at her, as if he could see through all her carefully constructed defenses. So, Levi continued, picking up his wine glass with a steady hand, imagine how interesting it will be to have someone as delicate as a hothouse flower learn that milk doesn't come in clean little bottles from the store. And imagine, Clara counterattacked, leaning slightly forward, and hating that she noticed how his eyes briefly dropped to the neckline of her dress before returning to her face. How challenging it will be for someone accustomed to giving orders to cows to have to converse with a human being who talks back. Martha let out a laugh that she tried to disguise as a cough. Mr. Hastings hid a smile behind his napkin. Levi was unfazed. On the contrary, his smile widened, and there was a fire in his eyes that made Clara's heart beat faster against her will. Sassy, are you? Good to know. At least the work won't be boring. Work? Clara raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. Mr. Dawson, I am not one of your maids. No, miss, he agreed, and there was something dangerous in that calm tone. Something that made Clara acutely aware that they were discussing her future marriage, her future as his wife. You'll be my wife, and on my ranch, everyone works, including me. You'll have to choose, be a useless porcelain doll that breaks at the first wind, or discover that you have more strength than you think, and that you can use those delicate little hands to cook and milk a cow. Porcelain doll. Clara stored the insult away as future ammunition. Don't worry, Mr. Dawson, she said. her voice sweet as poisoned honey. "I don't break easily. In fact, I'm accustomed to surviving situations that would crush weaker people." "Good." Levi raised his glass in a mocking toast. "Because where we're going, there's no doctor to attend to. Princesses who get the vapors." Clara raised her own glass, meeting his eyes with pure defiance. And for a moment, just one dangerous moment, she got lost in those golden eyes. There was intelligence there, humor, and something deeper that made her want to find out what else lay behind that annoying confidence. "And where I come from, Mr. Dawson, vapors are what's left after someone underestimates an educated woman with a sharp tongue and short patience." The glasses clinked in the air between them. For a second, neither drank. They just stared at each other, the air between them charged with something Clara couldn't name, but that made her skin tingle. Then Levi smiled, that slow, devastating smile, and drank, never taking his eyes off her. Clara drank too, and hated that her hands trembled slightly. Martha, watching everything from the corner of the room, murmured too quietly for the others to hear. "That spark is going to set the entire barn on fire. You, mark my words." And she was more right than she knew. The Alder Ridge Church was the kind that made Clara question whether she was really in the United States or had been transported to some settlement forgotten by civilization. Small, made of white wood peeling with time, with pews that creaked under the slightest weight, and a bell in the steeple that clinked crookedly when the wind blew hard. It was a Thursday afternoon, because even in this, her wedding strayed from the eye, conventional, and the sun streamed through the simple windows, creating patterns of light that would have been romantic if Clara hadn't been marching down the central aisle with the expression of someone walking to the gallows. The dress was simple. She had insisted on it. If she was going to be forced to marry a rancher in a church that looked like it had been built by very ambitious beavers, she might as well not look like she was trying too hard. Fine cotton fabric, cream white, an elegant cut but without the excesses of lace and pearls she had worn at Helena's balls. A small hat with a discreet veil, because even in Alder Ridge, a bride was expected to wear a hat. She carried a modest bouquet of wild flowers that Martha had gathered that morning. Daisies, lavender, and something Clara suspected was just especially pretty weeds. In the first row, her father watched with a look of satisfaction. Martha, her witness, stood beside him with a handkerchief in her hand, though Clara couldn't decide if the tears were from emotion or pity. On the other side of the nearly empty aisle, a few souls were present. Curious neighbors, probably. Faces Clara didn't know, but who watched her with poorly disguised interest. And in the last row, a middle-aged woman in an exaggerated hat, decorated with feathers that looked like they had been plucked from some particularly unhappy bird, watched with eyes that could freeze water in mid-July. Her lips were pursed into a line so thin they seemed to have completely disappeared. Next to her, a fair-haired young woman with a soft expression gazed at the altar with something close to poorly concealed mourning. Must be one of the charming local neighbors, Clara thought with internal sarcasm. But then her gaze found Levi at the altar, and something strange happened in her chest. He wore a dark suit that was clearly not new. There were discreet patches at the elbows, the fabric a little faded, at the knees, but it was impeccably clean and well-pressed. He had shaved, though he kept the trimmed beard that framed his face in an annoyingly attractive way. His hair was slicked back with water, still a little rebellious at the ends, as if resisting any attempt at domestication. And he was smiling. It wasn't a nervous or formal smile. It was genuine, almost amused, as if he found the whole situation funny, as if he were happy. "He has nerve," Clara admitted reluctantly as she approached, smiling at his own arranged marriage as if it were a Sunday picnic. But then his eyes met hers, and the smile changed. It became softer, more sincere, and Clara felt her heart do something foolish that she refused to analyze. Beside Levi was a man who could only be Clyde, thin as a broomstick, with a thick mustache that seemed to have a life of its own, a suit that smelled faintly of mothballs, clearly saved for special occasions, and an expression of silly fascination as he watched Martha in the front row. Clara reached the altar, Pastor Whitmore, an elderly man with eyebrows that seemed to have absorbed all the hair missing from his head, opened a prayer book so worn that the pages were transparent. "Brethren," he began in a husky voice, "we are gathered this Thursday afternoon." "Thursday," Clyde automatically confirmed, louder than he intended. "What?" Pastor Whitmore turned, confused. "Today is Thursday, Pastor," Clyde repeated. "You got it right this time." Levi briefly closed his eyes, as if asking the heavens for patience. "Clyde," he said in a controlled voice. Silence. "Yes, sir." "Sorry, Pastor." Clara bit the inside of her cheek to keep from laughing. She wouldn't give Levi the satisfaction of seeing her amused, but when she looked at him, she saw that he was already looking at her, eyes sparkling with shared humor. And for a second, just one dangerous second, it was as if they were accomplices in a private joke. Pastor Whitmore cleared his throat and began again. The ceremony proceeded with the speed of someone who had other things to do, possibly a sermon to write about patience with clumsy witnesses. It was time for the rings. "Clyde, the rings," the pastor requested. What followed was a comedy of errors that Clara would remember years later, with a mixture of horror and reluctant affection. Clyde plunged his hand into his waistcoat pocket, then the other pocket, then his trousers. His expression went from confident to confused, then to slightly terrified. "Clyde!" Levi's voice held a clear warning tone. "I had them! I swear I had them! They were right here!" Clyde was practically turning himself inside out, checking every pocket twice. Clara watched, oscillating between horror and a growing urge to laugh. It would be perfectly fitting for her disastrous wedding if the rings simply disappeared. Finally, Clyde reached into his inner waistcoat pocket, the last possible place, and his expression lit up as if he had found gold. "Found them!" He pulled his hand out with such enthusiastic force that the two rings flew into the air like startled birds. One hit the floor with a metallic clink that echoed through the silent church. The other went straight towards Martha. The housekeeper, with surprising reflexes for a woman in her 40s, reached out and caught the ring in midair, as if picking a low-hanging apple. She didn't even stand up. She just extended her arm with casual precision that suggested years of experience catching things Clara dropped as a child. "Dear Lord," someone muttered behind them. Clyde rushed after the ring that had rolled under the pew, crawling on the floor on his knees, rear end in the air in a completely undignified manner. Martha rose with imperial dignity and walked to the altar, depositing the ring in the pastor's outstretched hand with the look of someone dealing with particularly unruly children, which technically she was. "Thank you very much, Mrs. Martha," Pastor Whitmore said, clearly grateful for at least one competent person in the room. "You're welcome, Pastor," she replied, but her eyes were on Clyde, who emerged from under the pew with the other ring, hair full of dust, and a triumphant smile completely disproportionate to the situation. Clara realized with surprise that Martha was blushing, and that Clyde looked at her as if he had just witnessed a miracle, as if she had caught not a ring, but a falling star from the sky just for him. Interesting, she mentally filed away. Very interesting. Levi beside her was clearly struggling not to laugh. Clara heard him whisper between clenched teeth, his voice too low for the pastor to hear. "I should have asked the horse to be my best man. At least he's reliable." Clara couldn't hold it in. A small sound escaped, almost a laugh, quickly, disguised as a delicate cough. Levi turned to her, surprised, and his eyes met hers. For a moment, a strange, suspended moment, they shared something, genuine humor about the absurdity of the situation, complicity, something almost akin to friendship. Then Clara composed herself, putting her mask of offended dignity back on. But something had changed, just a fraction, but enough for her to feel it. The ceremony proceeded. Vows were exchanged. The traditional ones, no, personalization, which Clara silently appreciated because she wouldn't have known what to say. How do you vow anything genuine in an arranged marriage? But when Levi responded, his voice was firm, his eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her stomach do strange flips. "I do," he said as if there were no doubt, as if he genuinely wanted this. Clara felt something tighten in her chest. When it was her turn, Clara heard her own voice reply, surprisingly steady. "I do." 2 words. 2 words that changed everything. 2 words that made her this man's wife. This stranger who smiled too much, constantly teased, and looked at her as if he could see through all her defenses. Then, by the power vested in me by the state of Montana and the grace of God, Pastor Whitmore closed the book with the satisfaction of a task completed. "I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." The silence that followed was deafening. Clara felt panic rise in her throat. She hadn't thought about this part. Of course there was a kiss. There was always a kiss. But somehow, in all her mental planning of how to survive that day, she had conveniently forgotten this specific, dreadful detail. Levi took a step forward. He was tall. She had to lift her chin significantly to face him, and up close his eyes were even more disturbing. Golden at the edges, with small lines at the corners that indicated someone who laughed often. And in that moment, as he watched her, there was something more than humor. There was tenderness. "Relax," he murmured low, just for her, his hand moving up to lightly touch her arm. "I'm not as scary as you've painted me in your head." And then he kissed her. It was chaste, appropriate for a church, just a brush of lips, quick and without drama. But Clara felt as if someone had struck a match near her skin. Sudden, unexpected heat that spread from the point of contact all the way to her fingertips. His lips were softer than she expected, firm but gentle, and they smelled like mint. Had he chewed mint leaves before the ceremony, mixed with something deeper that was just him? When they parted, too quickly or too long, she couldn't decide. She had to blink a few times to reorient herself. Levi was smiling, that slow, irritating smile that suggested he knew exactly the effect he'd had, that he'd felt her heart race beneath the pearls she wore. Bastard, Clara thought, but without her usual conviction. Sparse applause echoed in the small church. Martha was genuinely crying now, wiping her eyes with the lace handkerchief Clara had given her for Christmas 3 years ago. Clyde whistled, a sharp, enthusiastic sound that made Pastor Whitmore frown with disapproval. And in the back, the woman with the exaggerated hat rose with an abrupt movement, grabbing her purse hard enough to make the clasp snap. The young blonde beside her gave Levi one last look with the expression of a dog abandoned on the road, before following her mother. Marlene Cooper stormed out of the church, letting the door slam behind her with violence that made the simple stained glass vibrate in its frames. "Who is that charming woman?" Clara whispered to Levi as they walked back down the aisle. His arm offered, and she accepting because it was expected, not because she liked his solidity under her fingers. "Marlene Cooper. She's a neighbor," he replied, his voice casual but with a hint of something. Amusement, relief? She had different plans for me. Plans? Oh, yes. She has a daughter, Annabelle, the blonde girl with her. 20 years old, good cook, and according to Marlene, perfect for a rancher who needs a practical wife. Clara felt something strange stir in her chest. It wasn't jealousy. Of course it wasn't jealousy. She had just married the man out of obligation, not choice. She had no right to be jealous. It was just territorial curiosity. Yes, that's it. "And did you consider those plans?" she asked, keeping her voice neutral. Levi glanced at her, and that irritating smile danced on his lips. "Mrs. Dawson," he said, stopping at the church door to fully face her, "are you jealous before we even reach the ranch? That's more promising than I imagined." "Don't be ridiculous." Clara lifted her chin, pulling her arm away. "I am merely collecting information about whom I'll have to deal with. Knowledge is power, Mr. Dawson." "Levi," he corrected. "We're married now. I think you can call me by my given name. Mr. Dawson is perfectly adequate." Stubborn, but he was still smiling. "Annoying," she countered. "Are you two going to stand here exchanging insults, or can we go home?" Martha's voice came from behind them. "Some of us want to take off these tight shoes." Outside the church, a wagon was waiting. It wasn't the elegant Ford that Clara used in Helena. It was a work wagon, open, exposed to the elements with wooden benches and clean but still recognizable hay in the back. Clara looked at it, then at Levi, then at the wagon again. "You're joking. It's either this or walk," he said. offering his hand with that annoying patience. "And it's 5 kilometers to the ranch. Your shoes won't last 500 meters on that road." Clara looked at her shoes, white satin, completely unsuitable for anything other than polished marble floors. Then at the dirt road, then at Levi, who waited with an expression that was half challenge, half genuine amusement. She took a deep breath, adjusted the skirt of her wedding dress, and accepted his hand. His calloused fingers closed firmly around hers, warm, rough, secure, as he helped her up. For a moment she was acutely aware of his hand on her waist, steadying her as she found her balance on the bench, of his strength, of his warmth so close. Then she was seated, and he let go. Was it her imagination, or did he take half a second longer than necessary? Walking around to the driver's side, Martha climbed up behind with Clyde's help, who offered his hand with exaggerated seriousness, as if assisting a queen into a royal carriage. Martha accepted with grace, but Clara saw the subtle blush on her cheeks. Clyde mounted a horse beside the wagon, still casting glances at the housekeeper with the expression of a dog that had just received a particularly juicy bone and couldn't believe its luck. Mr. Hastings said goodbye quickly. He had business in Helena and would return that same afternoon. He kissed Clara's forehead, held her shoulders for a moment as if wanting to say something, but only nodded. Then he turned to Levi, and the handshake they exchanged was firm, long, and loaded with non-verbal warnings about treating his daughter well or facing consequences. Consequences that would involve not just legal action but possibly physical violence from a man who had built a mining empire with his own hands. Levi held his gaze, nodded once, a silent promise from man to man, and Mr. Hastings seemed satisfied. And then the wagon started to move, taking Clara away from everything she knew. The path to the Dawson ranch was dust, the sun setting in the sky, and a silence that was only superficially peaceful. Clara held onto the side of the wagon as the wheels found every bump in the dirt road, jolts making her teeth clatter. Beside her, Levi handled the reins with an ease born of years, probably decades, of practice, his hands firm but gentle with the horses, his body moving naturally with the sway of the wagon as if it were an extension of it. He didn't even seem to notice the bumps, or the heat, or the fact that his new wife was holding onto the side of the wagon as if her life depended on it. The landscape gradually changed. The few houses of Alder Ridge were left behind. Simple, wooden structures, some well-maintained, others less so, replaced by open fields that stretched to the mountains on the horizon. The sky was such an intense blue, so clean and endless, that it hurt to look directly at it. And the silence, this heavy living silence of the countryside, was broken only by the steady rhythm of the horses' hooves, the occasional rustle of wind in the tall grasses that bowed like golden waves, and, "Is it always so quiet?" Clara finally asked, unable to bear the sonic emptiness anymore. In Helena, there was always noise, automobiles, people talking, music coming from some open saloon, the church bell marking the hours. Here, there was nothing but nature and her own very loud thoughts in her head. Quiet? Levi seemed genuinely confused, turning to look at her. "Are you listening? The birds." He gestured vaguely toward the sky. The crickets starting to wake up for the afternoon. The wind in the grasses. Clyde humming in. The back. "This isn't quiet, it's just different from what you're used to." Clara turned. Indeed, Clyde was humming something completely off-key as he rode alongside, a vague melody that had probably been a real song at some point. His eyes constantly drifted to Martha sitting in the back of the wagon, who pretended not to notice as she adjusted the luggage, but who, Clara swore, was sitting in a way to be more visible. "I meant without human noise," Clara clarified. "Without people." "Ah." Levi nodded as if she had revealed something profound about her soul. "You miss the constant hubbub." Understandable. Most city people do. He looked at her again, and there was something gentle in that gaze. Not pity, but understanding. "You'll get used to it. It takes time, but it happens. Some even say the silence becomes so necessary that they can no longer sleep in the city. I don't believe I'll be here long enough to get used to it," Clara said. Automatically, then bitter tongue. Levi smiled, not mockingly, but almost sad, and turned his attention back to the road. He didn't comment. He just kept guiding the horses, and Clara felt something strange, something close to guilt. She owed him nothing. It wasn't her fault she was there. He was part of the deal too. He had also sold himself, or sold his ranch, whichever way you looked at it. She didn't need to feel guilty for expressing what they both knew was true. This was an arrangement of convenience which might not work out, but still, the sad smile lingered in her memory. After another half-hour of travel, that completely destroyed any hope Clara had of keeping her wedding dress presentable. Road dust clinging to the cream-white fabric, folds that would never return to their original shape. A structure appeared on the horizon, the Dawson Ranch. Clara felt her stomach clench and turn over simultaneously. The house was simple, made of light. Wood that had seen many Montana summers and winters, 2 stories with a porch in front, wide, shaded with 2 very well-used rocking chairs, and a gently sloping roof. It wasn't ugly. In fact, it had an honest solidity to it, a permanence that suggested it would stand there for another 100 years if necessary. But it was so different from the Hastings mansion, with its marble columns, ornate balconies, and 3 stories of architectural splendor, that Clara had to swallow the lump in her throat. Beside the house, a red barn, or what had once been red, now more a shade of sun and time-faded red, dominated the space. It was large, surprisingly large. Wooden fences divided the fields into organized sections where Clara could see cows languidly grazing, some looking at the wagon with minimal bovine interest. Chickens pecked near the barn, a dozen of them in shades of brown and white, and something that looked like a pig, a massive pig, wallowed in the mud, of a small sty with suspicious satisfaction, occasionally grunting. It was a real ranch, functional, worked, real in a way the Hastings mansion, for all its luxury, never had been. "Welcome home, doll," Levi said, stopping the wagon in front of the house. There was something in his voice, subtle pride, perhaps nervousness about what she would think. Clara didn't answer. She was busy mentally calculating how many of the rooms in the Hastings mansion would fit into this entire structure. 4? 5? At most? Before she could disembark, a figure emerged from behind the barn. A young man, perhaps in his early 30s, in worn but clean work clothes, thin and angular like a hastily assembled scarecrow, with a straw hat that had seen better days. But his eyes were sharp, intelligent, assessing Clara with an attention that wasn't disrespectful but was direct. "Is that your bride, boss?" he asked without preamble, stopping a few feet from the wagon. "Looks like she can't even carry an empty bucket. She'll break on the first day of real work." The silence that followed was the kind that precedes storms or physical violence. Levi sighed, a sigh that suggested this type of comment was not unexpected from this particular man. Clara disembarked from the wagon herself, refusing Levi's outstretched hand with a deliberate movement. Her wedding shoes, white satin now covered in dust, sank slightly into the loose earth. She straightened, her spine, perfect posture, always perfect posture, shook the dust from her skirt with precise measured movements, and turned to face the man. She took 3 steps toward him, stopped, raised her chin. "And you," she said, her voice sweet and deadly as honey poured over thin ice, "must be the kind of man who judges books by their cover, because you never learned to read what's inside. What a pity. Literacy is a marvelous thing." Clyde, who was dismounting his horse, nearly fell over. Completely. Martha stepped down from the wagon, trying to hide a smile behind her gloved hand. And Levi let out a burst of laughter. Real, genuine, the kind that comes from the chest and transforms the entire face. The man blinked, processing the elegantly wrapped insult. Then, surprisingly, he also smiled, a slow, appreciative grin. "Good comeback, ma'am." He removed his hat in an exaggerated bow that was both mocking and genuine. "I'm Jake. I work with the horses, take care of the stables, and help out with whatever else is needed. And I apologize." He pressed the hat against his chest dramatically. "Sometimes my tongue moves before my brain thinks if it should." "A common affliction," Clara agreed with aristocratic coolness. "I hope it is not contagious. It would be terrible if everyone on the property suffered from the same problem." Jake chuckled, a real appreciative laugh. "She's sharp, boss," he said to Levi, putting his hat back on. "You'll need that. She'll keep you on your toes." He turned and disappeared toward the barn, still laughing softly, leaving Clara with the strange feeling that she might have just passed some kind of test. "You made a friend," Levi commented, finally stepping down from the wagon and coming to her side. "I established a boundary," Clara corrected. "It's different. Boundaries are important when living among rustic people." "Rustic people," Levi repeated, amused. "Good description. I'll tell Jake he's been promoted from crude to rustic. He'll be honored." Martha got down from the wagon with Clyde's help, who held her hand as if she were fine crystal, and retrieved the 2 modest suitcases Clara had brought. All that would fit in the wagon. The rest of her things, and there weren't many, not after her father decided that a rancher's wife doesn't need 12 trunks of clothes, would come later, maybe if she stayed, which she wouldn't, because this was temporary. Clara stood still for a moment more, looking around. The fields, the barn, the distant mountains, the impossible blue sky, the silence that wasn't really silence, just an absence of things she was accustomed to. "This is madness," she thought. "I don't belong here. I belong at balls and formal dinners and conversations about literature and art, not with chickens and mud and cows that look at you as if judging your soul. Are you going to stand there admiring the scenery all day or come in and see your new home?" Levi's voice came from the doorway. He was leaning against the frame, arms crossed, that annoying smile on his lips. Clara forced her legs to move. The interior of the house was functional. A living room with a sofa that looked built to last centuries rather than be comfortable, 2 wooden chairs with faded cushions, a stone fireplace that dominated an entire wall, clearly the heart of the house during Montana's harsh winters. The wooden floor was clean but scarred by years of boots and dragged furniture. Simple curtains on the windows, faded by the sun. A bookshelf with books. Books. Clara didn't expect that. Worn but well cared for volumes. Everything was clean, organized, but without any of the luxuries Clara considered basic. No Persian rugs, no artwork on the walls, no crystal chandeliers. The kitchen was worse. Small, with a wood-burning stove. A wood-burning stove in 1932. Yes, she knew many rural homes. Still had them. But seeing a real one, knowing she would have to use it. A sink with a hand pump instead of a faucet. A rustic table that looked like it had been built decades ago and was still perfectly solid. But it was also clean. Impeccably clean. The pots hanging on the walls shone. The floor was swept. There were no dirty dishes or crumbs. Someone takes care of this place. The bedroom is upstairs. Levi indicated the narrow staircase. "I left the largest one for us. Martha, we'll stay in the guest room at the end of the hall. It's smaller, but it has a good view of the fields. For us." The words hung in the air like birds of ill omen, circling her head. A shiver ran down her spine. Later, as the first stars appeared in the sky, Clara ascended the stairs, each step creaking beneath her feet, announcing her presence to the entire house. Martha followed her, carrying the suitcases with silent efficiency. The room was a room, a double bed, one bed, singular, not 2 separate ones as Clara had secretly, or not so secretly, hoped, with a simple but clean patchwork quilt, a dark wooden dresser, scarred but solid, a small mirror on the wall slightly stained at the edges, a window with a view of the field stretching to the horizon, clean, organized, completely devoid of personality or luxury. And that bed. "Well," Martha said, placing the suitcases on the floor. "It could be worse." "How?" Clara turned to her, trying to keep her voice controlled. "How exactly could it be worse, Martha?" "It could be Mr. Arthur," Martha said simply. "It could be you sharing a bed with a man who spits tobacco everywhere and smells worse than horse manure. It could be you with no choice but to endure. At least Levi Dawson. Well, he has his own teeth and he smells like soap. That's a start." Clara opened her mouth, closed it. There was no counter-argument to that. Martha's logic was, as always, unassailable. "I'm going to take my things to my room," Martha announced, adjusting one of the suitcases. "It's been a long day, but I still have to get organized, and you are going to sit down, breathe, and remember that you survived worse things than a ranch in Montana. Remember when you had chicken pox at 8 and I thought you were going to die? You survived that. You'll survive this, too." She left, leaving Clara alone with her thoughts and a growing sense of panic that threatened to swallow her whole. Clara sat on the edge of the bed, which creaked because of course it creaked. It would probably announce every move she made during the night, and looked around. This was her life now. That house, those fields, that man downstairs who was probably laughing at her right now, telling Jake about how the city princess could barely get off the wagon without help. Tears burned behind her eyes. A hot, unwelcome pressure. Clara blinked hard. She wouldn't cry. Crying would solve. What, exactly? Would it make the wood-burning stove turn modern? Would it make the house grow 3 more stories? Would it magically transport her back to Helena? No. So there was no point. She remained that way, lost in thought for a few minutes. Hey! She jumped. Levi was in the doorway. When had he come up? How quiet was this man? Leaning against the frame with that relaxed posture she was starting to recognize as his default setting. Comfortable in his own body in a way Clara, always conscious of posture and etiquette, never could be. Do you need something? She asked, trying to sound cold, distant in control. Actually, he entered, but kept a respectful distance, staying near the window instead of approaching the bed. I came to bring this. He held something out, a cup of tea, steaming, aromatic, the scent familiar and comforting amidst everything strange. Clara took it automatically, too surprised to maintain her cool facade. Thank you, she said, forced by the manners that had been hammered into her since birth. Look, Levi sat in the chair near the window, not on the bed. She noticed this, and something in her relaxed slightly. I know this isn't what you wanted. Hell, it wasn't what I planned either. When I agreed to your father's deal, I was thinking about saving the ranch, not, well, about you. He ran a hand through his hair, messing it up even more. But we're here now, and I can make things easy or hard. Your choice. I can be a husband in name only, leave you alone, maintain a polite distance. Or we can try to make this work. As partners, at least. Teammates. It doesn't have to be complicated. Clara took a sip of the tea. It was good. Perfect, in fact. The right temperature, the right strength. How did he know how to make tea so well? And what do you suggest? She asked, hating how her voice came out small, vulnerable, nothing like the confident woman she had always been in Helena. Honesty, he replied simply. You're smart, I'm sure. I saw it at dinner, how you analyzed every word, every movement. You have a sharp tongue you use like a sword, and enough pride to build a second fence around the entire ranch. He smiled slightly. But if you can lower your guard a little, you'll see it's not as terrible as you imagine. Not as terrible? Clara felt the familiar irritation return, and she was grateful for it. Anger was better than fear. She knew how to handle anger. Mr. Dawson, I was ripped from my life, married to a stranger in a 15-minute ceremony, and transported to a ranch where the employees literally bet on whether I can carry a bucket. I'm sorry if I'm not jumping for joy. Jake didn't bet anything, Levi corrected. He was just testing you, seeing if you'd break easy, and you didn't break. You responded well, in fact. He was impressed. What an honor, Clara said dryly. Fair enough, Levi admitted, leaning forward, elbows on his knees. But Clara, the use of her first name made her blink. Something too intimate, too close. You can spend all the time we have together fighting against this. Against me, against the ranch, against everything. Or you can try, just try. See if you can find something good here. I'm not asking you to love it, just not to completely hate it. Is that too much to ask? Clara held the teacup tighter, feeling the warmth through the porcelain. And you? She challenged. Are you going to make things easy or hard? Because so far you've constantly teased me, called me princess and doll, and made it clear you think I'm spoiled and useless. Hey, he raised his hands. I never said useless. Spoiled, yes. Princess, absolutely. But useless. He smiled. Someone who answers, sometimes my tongue moves before my brain, to Jake is not useless. Too sharp for her own good, maybe. But not useless. There was something in his tone. It wasn't mere flattery to calm her down. It seemed genuine. As if he really saw something in her beyond a city doll thrown onto a ranch. You can relax, princess, he said, standing up. I don't bite, unless you ask nicely. Clara threw the cushion at him. Levi caught it mid-air, laughing, and walked toward the door. "Wait," Clara said, realizing something obvious and terrifying. "Where are you going?" "Nowhere." He stopped, turning with an amused expression. "This is my room too. Or did you forget?" Clara's stomach plummeted. "No, absolutely not." She stood up, placing the cup on the dresser with a thud. "I will sleep in another room. There is no other room available." Levi crossed his arms, clearly enjoying himself. "Martha is in the guest room, and I'm not sleeping on the living room couch in my own house. Then I'll sleep on the couch." "A wife doesn't sleep on the couch while her husband is in bed," he said, his tone too reasonable, as if explaining basic math. "People will ask, they'll talk. They're already going to talk enough about our rushed wedding. I don't care what people will talk about, but I care what your father will think," Levi countered. "I made a deal with him. Part of that deal was to treat you with respect. Leaving my wife to sleep on the couch isn't exactly respectful." Clara opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. You can't be serious." "I am completely serious." He took a few steps closer, and Clara instinctively backed up until her back hit the dresser. "We are married, Clara, legally. A wife sleeps in bed with her husband. That's how it works. Not when the marriage is an arrangement. No one else knows that," he said, his voice lower now, his eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her heart race. "And I'm not giving the gossips in this town a reason to say I can't keep my own wife in my bed." The double entendre hung in the air between them. "I'm not going to. We're not going to." Clara gestured vaguely, her face burning. "You won't touch me." "I wasn't planning to," Levi said, but there was a teasing smile on his lips. "Unless, of course, you ask. Politely. Please and everything. You are unbearable. And you are melodramatic." He stepped closer. "It's one bed, princess. Big. Lots of pillows. I can even build a barrier in the middle if that makes you feel more secure about my restraint." Clara stared at him, looking for signs that he was mocking her, but his eyes, despite the humor, were serious. "Do you promise," she said slowly, "that you won't try anything?" "I solemnly promise." He placed his hand over his heart with an exaggerated gesture. "That I will not touch you without explicit and enthusiastic permission. You can sleep peacefully. I am many things, but I am not that kind of man." Clara studied his face for a long moment. Then, reluctantly, "All right, but I'm putting pillows between us. A barrier, impassable." "As you wish," he agreed, his smile widening. "I'll grab my nightclothes. Do I get 5 minutes of privacy?" 10, she demanded. 7, 10, agreed. He laughed, leaving the room and closing the door behind him. 15 minutes later, because Clara needed extra time to process the existential panic, she was lying in bed, covered up to her chin, wearing her most modest nightgown. No cleavage, long sleeves, fabric thick enough to be considered. Textile armor, with 5 pillows carefully arranged in the middle of the bed like a personal Great Wall of China. A knock on the door. "May I enter my own room?" Levi's voice came from the hallway. "Yes," Clara said, turning to face the wall. "But stay on your side." The door opened. Clara heard footsteps, the floorboards creaking, and then the mattress sank on the other side of the pillow barricade. She didn't look. She wouldn't look. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. But she could feel his presence, his warmth, his weight making the mattress tilt slightly toward her. The sound of his breathing. "Good night, princess," he said, his voice carrying obvious amusement. "Good night," she replied stiffly, still staring at the wall as if it were the most fascinating thing she had ever seen. Silence. Then, "Are you comfortable there?" Hugging the wall? "Perfectly comfortable." She lied. "Great, because I'm very comfortable here. Soft bed, soft pillows, wife, in bed. Well, it's behind 5 pillows, but technically in bed. Only thing missing is a goodnight kiss." Clara clenched her teeth. "You promised not to tease. I promised not to touch. I didn't say anything about not talking." "Then stop talking." "As you wish." He shifted, settling in, and Clara felt every movement reverberate through the mattress. "Sleep well. Don't worry, I'll keep a safe distance. Despite the tempting view of your very tense neck and your very rigid shoulder." "Levi." "Yes, my dear wife." "Shut up," he laughed. Low, husky, and completely unbearable. "At your service." Silence descended again. Clara remained perfectly still, every muscle tense, acutely aware of his every breath, his every minimal movement. "This is ridiculous," she thought furiously. "He's just a man in the bed, in the same bed, too close, too warm, probably shirtless or—" "Stop," she ordered herself. "Stop thinking about that." But it was impossible not to think. Not with him so close. Not with that scent. Clean soap and something masculine and indefinable, permeating the space. Not with his warmth reaching her even through the pillow barricade. Her heart was beating faster than it should. Her skin tingled strangely. And there was something else, a strange, warm, disturbing sensation that she absolutely refused to examine. "He can't know," she thought fiercely. "I won't look. I won't turn around. I won't give him the satisfaction of seeing that this affects me." On the other side of the barricade, Levi was lying on his back, hands behind his head, a mischievous smile on his lips as he watched the ceiling. He could feel the tension radiating from her in almost visible waves. He could hear her breathing, too controlled, too careful, revealing exactly how affected she was. "This is going to be interesting," he thought, his smile widening. Very, very interesting. Teasing her would be his favorite pastime. Watching that mask of control crack piece by piece, seeing the fire behind those blue eyes burn brighter and brighter. She was magnificent when she was furious. Imagine when she let her guard down completely. "Levi?" Her voice came tense from the wall. "Yes, princess. Are you dressed, right?" He chuckled softly. "Why? Are you curious or worried? Just answer the question." "I'm dressed," he confirmed. "Pajama pants, shirt, completely appropriate and decent. Disappointing, No, I am not disappointed." "Of course not," he agreed, his tone indicating he didn't believe her in the slightest. "You are annoying, and you are adorable when you're annoyed. Your cheeks get flushed, that little vein in your forehead." Clara grabbed one of the pillows from the barricade and blindly threw it in the direction of his voice. It hit him squarely. Levi let out a surprised "oof," then laughed. "That was one of your protection pillows. Now the barrier is, compromised. I'm going to have to restrain myself with pure willpower. Give it back." "No." He hugged the pillow, clearly enjoying himself. "It's mine now. Spoils of war. Levi Dawson." "Good night, Clara," he said, his voice still laced with laughter. "Sleep well. Dream of pillows and barriers, and husbands who keep their promises even when provoked." Clara turned even further towards the wall, which seemed physically impossible, but she managed it, pulling the blanket up to, her ears. Her heart was still racing, her face was still burning, and that strange sensation in her stomach refused to disappear. "Damn man," she thought. "Damn, annoying, unbearable, disturbingly attractive man." But even as she thought it, a minuscule smile, treacherous and involuntary, touched her lips in the darkness. Outside, night fell upon the Dawson ranch, and everything gradually quieted down. The chickens put away, the cows silent in their stalls, Jake crossing the yard with his lantern before disappearing into the hired hand's cabin, and Martha finishing her chores in the kitchen before going up to her room and turning off the light. One by one, the lamps in the house were extinguished until only darkness and silence enveloped the property, broken only by the occasional whisper of the wind and the silver shine of the moon over the fields. And upstairs, in the shared room, two people remained awake long after they should have been asleep. Clara, facing the wall, her heart slightly racing, her skin tingling with awareness of the male presence so close, trying to ignore the heat spreading to places it shouldn't, trying not to think about what it would be like to turn around, to look, to see that face in the darkness, failing miserably, and Levi on his back, the stolen pillow hugged tight, a mischievous smile still curving his lips even in the darkness, already planning how he would provoke his tempestuous wife tomorrow, how he would make those eyes flash again, how he would discover what lay beneath that armor of pride and control. Because if there was one thing he was discovering about Clara Hastings Dawson, it was that provoking her, seeing her react with all that fire, watching the blush rise up her neck when she got annoyed, hearing that sharp voice cutting him with surgical precision. It was the most fun, the most alive thing he had done in a long time. And taming that magnificent beast? Well, that would be, the challenge of a lifetime. And Levi Dawson never, ever turned down a good challenge. Clara's first night as Mrs. Dawson was coming to an end. And tomorrow, well, tomorrow would be a completely different challenge. Clara woke up to the crowing of the rooster, literally. A rooster, presumably the same one who had a strong personality and opinions about when the day should begin, right beneath the bedroom window, decided to announce the dawn with the enthusiasm of someone who had just discovered he possessed especially potent vocal cords. She blinked at the wooden ceiling, disoriented for a moment about where she was. Then everything came back. The wedding, the journey, the ranch, the shared room with a man who was legally her husband, but essentially a stranger. Beside her, the bed was empty. Levi had already gotten up, probably before the sun itself, as those types did. The indentation where he had slept was still slightly warm, and Clara hated that she noticed it. She hated even more the fact that at some point in the night, she had knocked down some pillows from her protective barrier and unconsciously turned toward him, as if seeking warmth. She lay there for a few more minutes, staring at the wooden ceiling, counting the knots in the wood, trying to convince herself that the whole thing was an especially elaborate nightmare. But the creaking of the mattress when she moved, the smell of earth and grass coming through the slightly, opened window, the distant sound of someone, Levi, Jake, Clyde, already working in the barn, and the damn rooster crowing again were all too terribly real. Well, she thought, forcing herself to get up, if I'm going to be stuck here, I might as well prove I'm not completely useless. She quickly washed herself in the water basin, cold, because there was no hot running water, of course not, and went downstairs still in her nightgown and robe. There was no one to impress anyway. Martha was probably still sleeping, deservedly so after organizing everything yesterday. Levi was clearly working, and Clyde, well, Clyde was somewhere being Clyde. The kitchen was empty and silent, bathed in golden morning light streaming through the window over the sink, highlighting every particle of dust in the air. Clara looked around, assessing the enemy territory. Wood-burning stove, monstrous, intimidating, with that iron mouth that seemed to mock her. Iron skillets hung on the wall, heavy and serious. A pantry with supplies she barely recognized. Unmarked bags of flour, jars with handwritten labels, dried things that could be herbs or could be poison, she really didn't know. And eggs in a basket on the table, brown and white, some still with feathers attached. Breakfast. How hard can it be? 40 minutes later, the answer was extremely, almost impossibly, difficult. The wood refused to catch fire properly. Clara tried to follow what she vaguely remembered seeing cooks do. Crumpled paper, small kindling, larger logs on top. But the paper burned too fast, or the kindling was damp, or she wasn't giving it enough air. When she finally got flames, they were pathetic and weak, barely warming the surface of the griddle. Then she added more wood, and suddenly she had too much fire, intense heat that made the stove hiss menacingly. The eggs, which she had successfully cracked. Small victory, she knew how to do that. Stuck to the way. Iron skillet with the determination of industrial glue. She tried to stir them with a wooden spoon, but only created carbonized pieces that refused to leave the bottom. The coffee was another tragedy. She was sure, certain, she had seen instructions on coffee grounds to water ratios in some home economics book. Martha had tried to make her read years ago, but apparently her memory was flawed, because the resulting liquid had the color and consistency of Missouri River mud, and smelled like something that should be used to dye leather, not for human consumption. The bread, because of course there should be toast, civilized breakfast included toast, was so hard the knife barely made an impression on the surface. Clara seriously considered using an axe, or perhaps just throwing it to the chickens and seeing if they could conquer it. "Something is burning," a low voice said behind her. Clara jumped so violently she almost dropped the skillet. She turned too, fast, nearly tripping over her own foot. Levi was in the back doorway, leaning against the jamb with that relaxed posture she was beginning to recognize. Dark hair wet, drops still occasionally dripping, as if he had just plunged his whole head into the well. Work shirt open at the first few buttons, revealing a V of tanned skin and a patch of muscular chest that Clara quickly averted her eyes from. Feeling heat rise up her neck that had nothing to do with the out-of-control stove, but not before noticing, before registering, before storing that image in some treacherous corner of her mind. "I'm aware," she replied with all the dignity she could muster, as smoke billowed from the skillet in increasingly dense spirals. Levi stepped in with economical movements, grabbed a cloth, apparently he knew exactly where everything was in his own kitchen, imagine that, and removed the skillet from the fire before it exploded into spontaneous combustion. He looked inside. His expression cycled through several emotions in quick succession. Genuine surprise, deep confusion, something that might have been poorly disguised horror, before settling on diplomatic neutrality that probably required all his self-control. "Was that egg?" he asked carefully, as if identifying an especially ancient and confusing fossil. "It is." Clara crossed her arms defensively. "Scrambled eggs. Are you sure? Because they look more like charcoal. Scrambled charcoal. You could use it to fuel the train furnace all the way to Great Falls. If you don't like it," she lifted her chin, "you can cook it yourself." "I usually do," he said, picking up a fork and poking the dark mass with almost scientific fascination, like a naturalist examining a previously unknown species. "But I didn't want to interfere with your culinary exploration, journey of discovery, experiment with the laws of physics." Clara felt her face heat up. Not with shame. She had done nothing that deserved shame. It was an honest attempt. The stove was clearly poorly designed, but with pure frustration that threatened to overflow into tears, which would be absolutely unacceptable. How could something as simple as eggs go so wrong? Women did this every day. Without formal education, some illiterate. "I'm going to taste it," Levi announced suddenly, picking up a piece from the less apocalyptically charred edge. "You don't have to," Clara began, part of her horrified, part secretly curious about whether it really was as bad as it looked. Too late. He put it in his mouth, chewed, continued chewing, which was probably a bad sign because eggs shouldn't require prolonged mastication. His expression remained carefully neutral, but Clara saw his left eye twitch slightly, and his throat work harder than necessary to swallow. "Well," she challenged. "Be honest." Levi swallowed, clearly requiring conscious effort and possibly physical courage. "It has character," he finally said, his voice controlled. "Character?" Clara arched an eyebrow. "Is that a euphemism for inedible?" "No, it has a strong personality, a striking and unforgettable presence." He paused, considering seriously. "It could be used as building material or mortar. I have a fence that needs reinforcing." Clara grabbed the nearest dish towel and threw it at him hard. Levi dodged, laughing, that genuine laugh that transformed his entire face. And Clara felt something traitorous stir in her chest. He wasn't being cruel. He was playing, trying to ease her obvious frustration with humor. But she wasn't ready to laugh at herself yet. "Good morning," Martha's voice echoed before she appeared through the back door, stopping abruptly as she crossed the threshold. Her eyes scanned the scene with the efficiency of a general assessing a battlefield. Clara disheveled, still in her robe, furious and on the verge of tears she refused to shed. Levi leaning against the counter, still chuckling, dish towel in hand, smoke lingering in the air like ghosts, and what was clearly an ambitious but catastrophic attempt at breakfast spread across the kitchen as evidence of a natural disaster. "Heavens above," she said, her tone carefully neutral. "What happened here? A fire? A scientific experiment?" "Mrs. Dawson was preparing breakfast," Levi explained, still with that annoying smile that made his eyes sparkle. Martha looked at the skillet, then at Clara, then at the coffee that seemed to have the consistency of tar, back at the skillet, as if expecting it to change if she looked long enough. "I see," she said with calculated tact. "How kind. Admirable initiative. But let me help, dear. These wood-burning stoves are treacherous, temperamental. They have their own personality and dark secrets. They take years to master. I can learn, Clara insisted, but her voice came out weak, unconvincing, carrying a defeat she hated to admit. Of course you can, Martha agreed, already taking command with efficiency born of 40 years of practice. You learn everything you set your mind to learn. But today, how about you observe? Pay attention to the details? Tomorrow you can try again with fresh knowledge. Clara knew when she was defeated. She retreated to the table, sitting down with the rigid posture of a lady, always posture, even in defeat, while Martha transformed chaos into order with practical and almost hypnotic movements. Levi sat opposite her, still with that playful smile on his lips, his eyes on her with something that might have been tenderness, admiration for the attempt. Don't say anything, Clara warned, crossing her arms. I wasn't saying anything. He raised his hands in false innocence. You were thinking out loud. I can hear your mocking thoughts from here. Thinking isn't a crime, not yet at least. It should be. In your case. Specifically. The door opened again and Clyde burst in with a gust of fresh air and the smell of the stable. Hay, leather, horses, earth. The honest smell of hard work. Morning. He stopped, his eyes meeting Martha's immediately as if she were a magnetic north. Martha, you're here. I thought, well, I hoped you... Not that I was specifically hoping, but... Good morning, Clyde. Martha didn't turn from the stove, but Clara noticed her back straighten, her shoulders squaring. Slightly, her posture improving. Did you sleep well? Like a rock, Clyde cheered up. I dreamed about... Well, it doesn't matter what I dreamed about. He blushed violently. I just wanted to know if the room was comfortable. Is the mattress good? Why, yes, thank you. Clara watched the exchange fascinated. Clyde flirting with Martha. In a matter of minutes, because Martha was magic or a witch or some combination, she produced real coffee, a heavenly aroma that made Clara realize how wrong hers was. Perfectly scrambled eggs, creamy, golden yellow, the consistency eggs should have. Golden toast, because she managed to slice the rock-hard bread with apparent ease, and even crispy bacon that smelled like smoked paradise. Clyde attacked the food with the enthusiasm of a genuinely hungry man, talking with his mouth full as he chewed. Martha, this is divine. You're the best cook in 3 counties. No, in all of Montana. No, in... Clyde. Martha cut in with sharp coolness, though her eyes sparkled with something that might have been affection. Close your mouth to chew. We were not raised in barns. There are proper manners even on a ranch. Actually, Levi said, grabbing a piece of toast, Clyde was raised in a barn. His parents lived above the stable on the Henderson farm when he was born. True story. Don't help. Clara cut in, but she was fighting a treacherous smile that threatened to escape. Clyde swallowed, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. Martha sighed deeply as if appealing to the heavens for strength, then tried again with obvious effort to use civilized manners. Sorry, ma'am, Martha. It's just that it's so good I forgot the manners you're trying to teach me. Then remember them, she said, but she brought 3 more slices of bacon to his plate, a movement so natural she probably didn't even realize she was doing it. Clara noticed Levi watching everything with an amused expression, his eyes moving between Martha and Clyde like a spectator at an especially entertaining tennis match. What? She asked softly, leaning towards him. Nothing, he whispered back, leaning in too until they were very close, breaths almost mingling across the table, just finding it interesting how Martha already has Clyde eating out of the palm of her hand. Literally, she knows how to handle anyone, Clara whispered. She raised me after all, and I was quite a challenging child. You? Levi raised an eyebrow, a slow smile forming. Challenging? I don't believe it. You seem so docile and pliable. But come to think of it, that explains a lot about you, Levi said, his voice normal now. The stubbornness, the sharp tongue, the ability to turn eggs into a potential weapon. Clara kicked his shin under the table with calculated force. Levi laughed, but didn't pull back. After breakfast, which Clara ate in mortified silence while every forkful of Martha's perfect eggs was a reminder of her own incompetence, Levi met her on the porch. She was still in her robe, looking out at the fields with an expression he was beginning to recognize. a prisoner assessing the walls of her cell, calculating the chance of escape, measuring the distance to freedom. "Get into some more practical clothes," he said without preamble, leaning against the porch column. "You have work to do today." Clara turned slowly, her movements measured. "Work?" The word came out with obvious skepticism. "If you're going to live on a ranch, you need to be useful, contribute, learn." He paused, letting the next sentence hang with deliberate weight. "Or do you plan to sit like a porcelain doll on the shelf, merely pretty and decorative?" Clara's eyes flashed. Good. He liked it when she turned fire instead of ice. "I already proved this morning that I am not useless." "You proved you can't cook," he corrected. "Yet. But that can be learned. Now let's see if you can learn other things." 20 minutes later, Clara came downstairs dressed in her practical dress, which was still more elegant, with more lace and detail than anything the local women wore for daily work. But it was progress. She tried. Levi was waiting for her near the barn with 2 wooden buckets. "We're going to milk Bessie," he announced, as if inviting her to tea. "Bessie?" Clara frowned. "The cow." He pointed to a large brown animal grazing near the fence, occasionally looking in their direction with bovine eyes that Clara swore were judging. "She's the gentlest, perfect for beginners, patient with human lack of skill." Clara approached cautiously, as if addressing a potentially dangerous wild animal. The cow was enormous, massive. How had she never realized how big cows were? In paintings they seemed so smaller, manageable. This one seemed capable of crushing her just by falling sideways. Levi positioned the 3-legged stool beside the animal with the efficiency of years of practice, placed the bucket underneath. "Sit here," he instructed, his voice patient. "Lean lightly against her flank like this," he demonstrated, his large hand resting on the side of the cow, "so she knows where you are. Then hold the teats like this and pull with a steady rhythm. Not too hard, not too weak. Consistency is key." Clara sat gingerly on the stool, acutely aware that she was sitting next to a creature that probably weighed half a ton, trying not to think about how close she was to something that could effortlessly step on her or kick her or do any number of potentially lethal things. She hesitantly reached out towards the cow's parts, feeling heat rise to her face. This was so profoundly undignified. "Go on," Levi encouraged, his voice gentler now. "She won't bite, I promise." "How can you be absolutely sure?" "Cows don't have front teeth," he explained patiently. "Basic bovine anatomy. They can chew grass with their back teeth, but they can't actually bite. So you are safe from dental attack. Useful information, but not exactly comforting when one was so vulnerable." Clara grasped as Levi showed a strange, warm feeling, firmer than she expected, and pulled. Nothing happened. She tried again, adjusting the angle. Still nothing. Bessie turned her head to look at her with those large brown eyes, an expression that Clara swore clearly communicated. "Seriously? Is that the best you can do? Pathetic." "Firmer," Levi instructed from behind her. "You won't hurt her. She has thick skin, literally." Clara pulled harder, determination growing. She was not going to be defeated by a cow. She had already been defeated by eggs this morning. Cows were not going to. A jet of milk shot out, directly onto her face. Warm, surprising, completely unexpected. Clara screamed, completely lost her balance, her arms flailing in the air trying to find support that wasn't there, and tumbled off the stool in a spectacularly inelegant heap of skirts, petticoats, and utterly destroyed dignity. Levi erupted in laughter, not polite or muffled laughter, real doubled-over laughter, having to lean on the fence to keep from falling too. Clara, sitting on the dusty barn floor, milk dripping down her nose and chin, her carefully combed hair now full of straw, grabbed the empty bucket, because of course she hadn't managed to milk anything before the disaster, and threw it at him with all the force she possessed. Levi dodged, but didn't stop laughing. "It's," she said, struggling to get up, her skirts heavy and cumbersome. "Not." She wiped her face with the back of her hand, only spreading the milk. "Funny." "It is too," he managed to say between laughs, wiping tears from his eyes. "Sorry, but the look on your face when..." Another wave of laughter hit him. Clara advanced on him with violent intent, but Levi held her by the shoulders, firm, warm hands through the thin fabric of her dress, preventing any physical attack she planned. Calm down, he said, still smiling but attempting control. Come on, I'll show you properly this time. Promise, no more milk attacks. He guided her back to the stool with a gentleness she hadn't expected, carefully cleaning straw from her hair with his fingers. This time he positioned himself directly behind her, very close, his body near, and Clara became very, very conscious of him, of the heat radiating from his body, penetrating through her back to her dress, of his solidity, muscle and strength and male presence impossible to ignore, of the scent, simple soap, honest earth, clean sweat from hard work and something deeper that was just Levi, impossible to name, but indelible. Like this. His voice was close to her ear now, low, husky in a way that made something tighten inside her. Feel my hands? He placed his large hands over hers, completely encompassing them, guiding. Calloused palms, strong fingers, heat burning through her skin. Clara couldn't speak. She just nodded. Good. Feel the rhythm? He moved her hands, demonstrating the motion. Steady, gentle but firm, like... He paused and Clara felt his breath against her neck, like persuasion, not force. Persuasion. Clara wasn't feeling the rhythm of anything. Her brain had completely shut down, replaced by pure awareness of every point of contact between them. Her back against his chest, her hands under his breath lightly moving her hair. Her heart was beating so loudly she was sure he could hear it. Clara? His voice dropped even lower, almost intimate. Are you paying attention or do I need to repeat? Yes, she managed to say, her voice coming out husky, unrecognizable. I'm paying attention. A lie. A complete lie. She was paying attention to nothing except him. Then repeat. He released her hands but didn't move away. Still close, the warmth still there. His presence still dominating all her senses. Clara tried to replicate the movement, her hands trembling slightly. And this time, a genuine miracle. Milk squirted into the bucket with a satisfying metallic sound, a steady rhythm, exactly as it should. I did it! She turned around excitedly, completely forgetting where she was, how close he was, everything except the sudden pride of having mastered something, anything, and found their faces separated by inches. Levi's eyes on hers, golden in the filtered light of the barn, warm, intense in a way that caught her breath in her throat. She could see details she had never noticed. Faint freckles across the bridge of his nose, a small scar near his left eyebrow, the fine lines around his eyes that indicated someone who smiled frequently, and his mouth, his lips, slightly parted, too close, so close that if she leaned in, just a little, time seemed to stretch, the moment suspended like amber preserving an insect. Bessie mooed loudly, a sudden booming sound that reverberated through the entire barn, shattering the moment like a hammer on glass. Clara blinked, snapping back to reality with the hangover of a dream being shed. Levi retreated quickly, almost stumbling, clearing his throat with a rough sound. Good job, he said, his voice louder than necessary, forcibly casual. Keep going until you, fill half a bucket, then you can stop. We don't milk her completely the first time, leave some for the calf. There was a calf. Clara didn't know about a calf. He left the barn too quickly, practically fleeing, leaving her alone with Bessie, who looked at her with an expression that definitely said, human drama. How tedious. Clara sat on the stool, her hands continuing the mechanical movement of milking, but her mind was somewhere else entirely. Her heart was still racing for reasons that had absolutely nothing to do with milk or cows or agriculture. Everything to do with golden eyes and warm hands and a moment that almost turned into something she wasn't ready to name. Damn, she thought, watching the milk fill the bucket. This is trouble. This is big, complicated trouble and I shouldn't be feeling this. But she was, feeling it, and that terrified her more than any cow ever could. Clara was almost proud of herself. Half a bucket of milk, achieved. With considerable effort, and only 2 more squirts to the face, which she was beginning to suspect Bessie did on purpose for bovine amusement. She was heading back to the house when she saw the automobile raising dust on the road. A Ford Model A, black and gleaming under the midday sun. Rare in the countryside, but not impossible. Some prosperous families had already abandoned horses for an engine. Money, Clara thought immediately, recognizing the signs. A woman got out of the car, with movements calculated to demonstrate grace. In her 40s, wavy hair pulled back in a low bun, a patterned cotton dress with a defined waist. Current fashion, but clearly expensive by local standards. Low-heeled shoes, appropriate but too polished for real work. A cloche hat decorated with a satin ribbon. Cotton gloves, the woman with the exaggerated church hat. Marlene Cooper, beautiful in a carefully maintained way. And her eyes, when they met Clara's across the yard, were sharp as a razor. Rival, Clara thought. Be careful. Mrs. Dawson, the woman said, her voice too sweet, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I came to congratulate you on your marriage. What a lovely ceremony. The tone suggested the opposite. Mrs. Cooper. Clara adjusted her posture, lifted her chin. She was at a disadvantage. Milk-stained dress, hair escaping its pins, no hat. But she wouldn't show weakness. Very kind of you. I brought a welcome pie. Marlene held a covered plate. The smell of apple and cinnamon escaped. It's customary among neighbors. Even when weddings are so rushed, there's barely time for proper preparations. Marking territory, Clara thought, showing what she can do, what I can't. The young blonde from the church got out of the car, in her early 20s, softly pretty. A simple house dress, hair in loose braids, eyes already searching for someone specific. My daughter Annabelle, Marlene said, a possessive hand on her daughter's shoulder. I recall you saw her at the ceremony. An excellent cook, grew up here, knows every aspect of a ranch. Unlike, well, some people. The pause was deliberate as a knife. Pleasure to see you again, Annabelle murmured politely, but her eyes had already found Levi, who was coming out of the barn buttoning his shirt. Clara recognized that look, pure adoration, and felt something burn in her chest. Levi, Marlene called, her voice changing completely, becoming almost syrupy. Darling, I brought pie, your favorite. I know you like my pies. The double meaning was too obvious. Levi approached, finishing buttoning his shirt, his expression polite but distant. Mrs. Cooper, Annabelle, thank you for the visit. Congratulations on the marriage, Marlene said, taking a step toward him. The ceremony was simple, but beautiful, although everything was so quick. We barely had time to process the news you were getting married before the ceremony. Some say rushed weddings are a sign of, well, necessity. Clara felt the fire rise up her spine. When it's right, Levi said. And to Clara's surprise, he came to stand beside her, not near Marlene. I see no reason to wait when a man finds the right woman. The decision is clear. Clara felt something warm bloom in her chest. Annabelle looked at Levi as if he were water in the desert. Mr. Dawson, she said in a soft, almost childlike voice, if you need any help with the house or cooking or anything. Mother always said I'm very good at domestic tasks. I could come a few days a week. Teach your wife, since she's from the city and probably doesn't know, well, anything useful for a ranch. Clara felt the heat run through every nerve. How kind, she said, her voice coming out sweet as poisoned sugar. But we have everything under control. In fact, Levi was just about to show me our bedroom. Some improvements we planned. Very private, very personal. Dramatic pause, letting the implication hang. Oh, but we have visitors, she continued as if the thought had just occurred. What a shame. The improvements will have to wait. Marlene blinked, processing the insult wrapped in courtesy. Annabelle blushed violently. Levi bit his lip, hiding a smile that threatened to escape. Of course, Marlene quickly recovered, her eyes narrowing, her smile growing sharper. We wouldn't want to disrupt improvements. I just wanted to congratulate you and say that I'm sure you'll adapt, eventually. If you survive the first winter, Montana is brutal on delicate city creatures. I'm sure I will. Clara maintained her smile, refusing to show intimidation. After all, Levi says I'm stubborn as a stuck mule, and mules survive practically anything, even overly helpful neighbors. Marlene pushed the pie against Clara's chest with more force than necessary. "Well," she said, her voice losing the veneer of civility, "we'll be back for visits, frequent ones, very frequent. We are close neighbors, after all." It was a clear, undisguised threat. "I can't wait," Clara lied with exaggerated enthusiasm. The automobile drove off, raising a cloud of dust, the engine revving louder than necessary. When it disappeared around the bend in the road, Clara turned and found Levi watching her with obvious amusement and something warmer. "Jealousy looks good on you," he said, a slow smile forming. "It brings fire to your eyes, color to your cheeks. I am not jealous." Clara lifted her chin, holding the pie with a grip that was probably crushing the crust. "Just marking territory, establishing boundaries." "Ah." He stepped closer, taking the pie from her hands, his fingers deliberately brushing hers. "So I am territory now? Property to be protected?" "You are my husband," Clara said, aware of how that sounded, how it proclaimed possession. "Legally and officially." "Legally and officially," he agreed, closer now, close enough that she had to tilt her chin up to maintain eye contact. "And territorially?" Clara didn't answer. She didn't trust her voice, the words that might escape, the inconvenient truths that were beginning to form. She spun on her heels and entered the house with all the dignity she could muster, leaving him on the porch chuckling softly. But as she climbed the stairs, her hands still trembling slightly from adrenaline and something more complicated, she couldn't ignore the truth forming in some treacherous corner of her heart. She didn't want Annabelle near Levi. She didn't want Marlene looking at him with those calculating eyes. She didn't want anyone touching him, talking intimately with him, sharing smiles. And it wasn't just about property or pride or keeping up appearances. It was something more dangerous, deeper, more frightening. It was something that was beginning to feel dangerously like, no, she wouldn't name it. Not yet. But it was there, growing like a stubborn plant in soil that should be barren, refusing to die no matter how hard she tried to ignore it. And that was trouble. Big trouble. Because real feelings were not part of the agreement. Real feelings could hurt her. And Clara Dawson did not allow herself to be hurt. At least that's what she kept telling herself. 3 days after the culinary disaster and Marlene's visit, Clara decided she needed to get off the ranch before she went crazy. Martha suggested going to Alder Ridge for supplies, and Clara accepted with a relief she couldn't entirely disguise. Levi offered to accompany her, guiding the wagon, but Clara insisted on going alone. She needed to prove to herself more than anyone else that she could handle simple things. He had already taught her how to drive the reins, and it was a good time to practice. Martha made a list, Levi gave her money and instructions on which store to look for, and Clara set off with a determination that would have been more convincing if her hands weren't trembling slightly on the reins. Alder Ridge was no Helena. The streets were dirt, the shops had simple wooden facades, and there wasn't a single window display Clara would consider truly appealing. But there was activity, people greeting each other, children running, the sound of a hammer coming from the blacksmith's. Clara guided the wagon to the general store, a larger building than the others with a faded sign, Henderson and Sons. As she got down, she adjusted her dress and hat. She had learned her lesson about going out without a hat, raised her chin, and walked inside. The interior smelled of coffee, spices, wood, and something indefinable that was just store. Shelves were crammed with goods, from pots to fabrics, barrels of flour and sugar, a long counter where an elderly man with small glasses and suspenders was tending. "Good morning," Clara approached, showing Martha's list. The man, presumably Mr. Henderson, studied her over his glasses. "You must be the new Mrs. Dawson," he said, without hostility but also without particular warmth. "Heard about the wedding. News travels fast." "In Alder Ridge?" "News travels before it even happens." He took the list, frowning. "I can get all this. Give me 20 minutes to put it together." "Thank you." Clara turned to wait, and that's when she realized she wasn't alone in the store. 3 women near the fabrics, middle-aged practical dresses, simple hats, looking directly at her while whispering. Clara feigned interest in a shelf of preserves, but her ears, sharpened by years of navigating treacherous social circles, always caught every word. Arranged marriage, I heard. Her father practically sold her. Marlene said she can't even cook. Poor Levi. And now he has to look after a city doll. Clara felt heat rise up. Her neck, her hands clenched a can of peaches hard enough to dent it. It'll last a month tops. Annabelle would be much better. At least she knows what to do on a ranch. Something inside Clara cracked. It wasn't anger. It was humiliation mixed with the fear that maybe they were right. Ladies, Mr. Henderson's voice cut through the gossip like a blade. The fabrics you wanted are here, and I suggest you keep opinions about people you barely know to yourselves. The women turned away, embarrassed. We weren't, one began. You were, Mr. Henderson interrupted. And it was ugly to hear. He turned to Clara. Mrs. Dawson, ignore those loose tongues. Give the girl time. A city isn't conquered in a day, and a ranch even less so. Clara blinked, feeling a sting behind her eyes. She wasn't going to cry. Not here. Thank you, Mr. Henderson, she managed to say, her voice firm. And don't worry, I don't faint easily. She looked directly at the women, who were now studying the fabrics with exaggerated interest. And as for cooking, I'm learning. After all, everyone had to learn someday. The difference is, when I learn something, I usually do it better than average. She didn't wait for a response. She turned and walked back to the counter, where Mr. Henderson was hiding a smile behind his gray beard. 20 minutes later, with supplies loaded and dignity more or less intact, Clara headed back to the ranch. But the words remained. Poor Levi, city doll. A month, tops. She was going to prove them wrong. She didn't know how yet, but she would. Clara returned later than she intended. The sun was already beginning its descent when the wagon entered the ranch driveway. She was exhausted, not just physically, but emotionally drained by the gossip that kept echoing. But then she saw the scene near the barn, and the fatigue evaporated, replaced by something hotter and unpleasant. Levi was there, shirt dirty, from work, fixing something on the barn door, and next to him, handing him tools with abundant smiles, was Annabelle Cooper. Clara stopped the wagon more abruptly than necessary. Neither of them noticed initially. They were laughing about something, Annabelle practically glowing under Levi's attention. And then the pig just walked into the house during tea. Annabelle laughed, touching Levi's arm lightly. Levi was laughing too, that easy, genuine laugh. Something tightened in Clara's chest. Something ugly and possessive. Jealousy, she recognized with horror. I'm jealous. Of Annabelle Cooper. Of the blonde girl who knew how to hand over tools and make Levi laugh, and who could probably milk cows without getting milk in her face. Mrs. Dawson, Annabelle finally noticed, waving with excessive enthusiasm. I didn't hear you arrive. Clearly, Clara said, getting down from the wagon with controlled movements. Levi turned, wiping his hands. Did you get everything? I did. Did you need help? I did not. Something in her voice made Levi frown. Annabelle stopped by to return a tool her father borrowed, he explained, and stayed to help with the barn. How helpful? Clara forced a smile. Miss Cooper, I'm sure your mother is waiting for you at home. Oh, mother doesn't mind. Annabelle smiled innocently. She always says it's important to be a good neighbor. I bet she does, Clara thought. Even so, it's getting late. We wouldn't want to worry her. Annabelle finally caught the tone. Her smile wavered. Of course, Mr. Dawson, if you need anything. We appreciate it, Levi interrupted, polite but firm. Give my regards to your parents. Annabelle left, but not without shooting one last look at Levi. Hopeful and annoyingly persistent. Clara began unloading the supplies by herself, her movements brisk. Let me help. Levi approached. I can do it alone. Clara, I said I can do it alone. Yay. Picked up a heavy sack of flour, underestimated the weight, and almost dropped it. Levi grabbed the other end before it fell. Stubbornness is no substitute for strength, he said calmly. And helpful neighbors are no substitute for wives, Clara retorted before she could stop herself. Silence. Levi put the sack down, studying her. You're jealous. It wasn't a question. Don't be ridiculous. Clara turned away, picking up another bag. Why would I be jealous of a girl who hands out tools? I don't know. Levi blocked her path. Why would you be? Clara opened her mouth, closed it. She had no answer that wouldn't reveal too much. I'm tired. It was a long day. She walked past him, entering the house with a dignity that would have been more effective if she wasn't carrying a bag of potatoes that threatened to rip. That night, dinner was a tense silence. Martha had prepared stew. Delicious, warm, comforting. Clara ate mechanically, staring at her plate. Levi tried to make conversation a few times. Martha answered politely. Clara mumbled monosyllables. Finally, Martha collected the plates and disappeared into the kitchen. Levi put down his cutlery with a sound louder than necessary. You're quieter than a graveyard at night, he said. Are you going to keep pretending everything's fine? Everything is fine. Liar. That made her look up. Her eyes met his, challenge in them. I apologize if I'm not being good company. I've been busy. Listening to the town women explain how utterly inadequate I am to be your wife. And then I came back to find you laughing with Annabelle Cooper, as if she were the most fascinating person in the world. Forgive me if I'm a little discouraged. Levi blinked. Then, surprisingly, he smiled. You're jealous, he said again, but there was something warm in his voice. I'm tired of competing with neighbors who know how to milk cows and hand over tools and make you laugh with pig stories. She turned to leave, but Levi got up quickly, gently catching her arm. Clara, wait. Why? To hear that Annabelle would be a better wife? That I'm just a city doll? I heard enough of that today. Hey. Levi's voice softened. He pulled her closer, his hands on her shoulders. Annabelle is nothing. She's a sweet girl, but that's all. Who knows things? Clara hated how small her voice sounded. Who belongs here? And you don't? Levi tilted his head. Clara, you stood up to, your father, accepted an arranged marriage, came to a completely different place, and in less than a week you're already learning to milk cows and go to town alone. Doesn't that count as belonging? Clara blinked, surprised. I burned the eggs. You did, Levi agreed, his eyes shining. Turned them into charcoal, but you tried. And you'll try again. And you'll get it right, because you're too stubborn to give up. Their faces were very close. Clara could see the faint freckles, the golden tone in his eyes. Annabelle means nothing, Levi repeated, his voice lower. You know that, don't you? Clara swallowed hard. Maybe I need to hear it again. Levi's smile was slow, devastating. As many times as you need. He leaned in, his hand moving up to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheek. You are my wife, the only one I want. Time slowed down. Clara felt her heart pounding. Levi's eyes dropped to her lips, then back up, silently asking for permission. She began to lean in, and then Martha walked in from the kitchen carrying a teapot and stopped abruptly. Oh, she said, I'll take this somewhere else. The moment broke. Clara quickly backed away, her face burning. Levi ran a hand through his hair, letting out a frustrated sigh. No, Martha. Clara cleared her throat. We were just talking. Of course, Martha smiled. Talking. Naturally. Clara fled to the bedroom, her heart still racing, her lips tingling from a kiss that didn't happen. And downstairs, Levi was left alone, smiling at nothing. 2 days later, Wednesday, Clara's opportunity to prove her worth came in the form of a cattle buyer named Burton. She was on the porch, trying to sew a patch onto one of Levi's shirts, doing a terrible job, when she heard raised voices near the barn. Levi and a man in a shabby suit were arguing, their gestures broad, their expressions tight. Clara put down her sewing and walked over. That's my final offer, Dawson, said Burton, a portly man with a waxed mustache. $15 a head. Take it or leave it. That's below market price. Levi crossed his arms. And the cattle are in excellent shape. Market's tough. Burton shrugged. Everyone's selling, supply and demand. Clara stopped beside Levi, studying Burton with eyes trained since childhood. Mr. Burton, she said calmly, I'm sure you can do better than that. Burton turned, surprised. Then he smiled. Condescendingly, Mrs. Dawson, business matters are complicated. They are indeed, she interrupted, her voice sweet but sharp, which is why I recognize a bluff when I see one. The market isn't that tough. My father just sold mining stocks above projected. The economy is in recovery. And healthy cattle, she gestured, are worth at least $20 a head. Probably more. Silence. Burton blinked. Levi stared at Clara as if he'd never seen her before. You understand business? I grew up in it. Clara smiled, but it wasn't gentle. And I learned that men who say final offer usually have room to improve. So, Mr. Burton, $22 a head, or we take the cattle to Great Falls. I'm sure we'll find buyers who value quality. Burton opened his mouth, closed it, looked at Levi, who was watching in fascination. 20, Burton countered. 22. Clara didn't back down. And we close now. Otherwise, good afternoon. She turned, confident he would call her back. 3 steps later, wait, Burton sighed. 22, but I choose the animals. Deal closed. Clara turned, extending her hand. We have an agreement. Burton shook her hand, still looking stunned. When he was gone, promising to return the next day with payment, Levi turned to Clara. Princess, he said, genuine admiration in his voice. You have more fire than a wood stove. Clara smiled, feeling something warm in her chest. I told you I had competence. They just weren't cow competencies. Levi laughed and then, impulsively, he grabbed her by the waist and spun her around. Clara squeaked in surprise, then laughed too, holding onto his shoulders as the world spun. When he set her back down, they were breathless, smiling, too close. You are incredible, Levi said simply. And for the first time since she arrived, Clara believed that maybe she could belong there. A week later, the sky changed color during lunch. Clara noticed it first. She had grown accustomed to Montana's infinite blue. So when dark clouds began to gather on the western horizon like ink spilled across paper, she felt something clench in her stomach. Clyde burst through the kitchen door with an urgency that made Martha drop the spoon she was holding. Storm coming, he announced, taking off his hat and wringing it in his hands. And it looks bad. Real bad. Levi stood up immediately. How much time do we have? 2 hours, maybe 3. Winds. Already shifting. Clyde looked out the window, frowning. We need to secure everything. Animals inside, tools stored, windows reinforced. Right. Levi was already moving. Is Jake in the north field? He is. Sent word. Good. Clara. Levi turned to her and there was no condescension in his voice, only urgency. I need you helping inside. Martha, close all the upstairs windows. Clyde, with me to the barn. They scattered. Clara stood still for half a second, then followed Martha. Up the stairs. What do I do? She asked as Martha began locking windows with efficiency. Close the ones in your room and the guest room. Make sure the latches are tight. Martha was already in the 3rd room. And bring down anything light that might fly. Vases, books, whatever's on the tables. Clara worked quickly, surprised by her own efficiency. Perhaps weeks of disastrous attempts were finally teaching her something useful. Outside, the wind was beginning to howl. When they came down, Levi was bringing firewood inside, pile after pile, because if the storm lasted for days, they would need fire. Clara joined him without asking, carrying armfuls that left splinters in her hands. Be careful. Levi took her hand, examining her palms. You'll hurt yourself. I'm already hurt. Clara pulled her hand back. But I'll survive. Keep working. He smiled, that smile that said she constantly surprised him, and went back outside. In the barn, Clyde and Martha worked side by side, securing doors that threatened to fly open with the rising wind. Martha held nails, Clyde hammered, the two in a surprisingly efficient dance. You're good at this, Clyde commented, hitting a nail precisely. Holding nails, I mean. It's a complex skill, Martha replied dryly. Years of practice. No, seriously. Clyde paused, looking at her with awkward sincerity. Martha, you have steady hands, reliable, like good hands. Martha turned slowly, her eyebrow raised. Good hands? Yeah. Clyde brightened, clearly thinking he was doing well. They're not too delicate, you know. They're practical, useful, like the hands of someone who knows how to really work. The silence that followed was broken only by the wind. Clyde, Martha finally said, her voice dangerously calm. Did you just compare my hands to tools? No, He blushed violently. I mean, yes, but in a good way. Tools are important, essential, and your hands are… Stop. Martha held up one of the offending hands. Before you say something even stupider, I just meant I like you, Clyde blurted out. I like working with you, and your hands, and your face, and the way you scold me when I talk with my mouth full. Martha blinked, processing. Then, surprisingly, her cheeks flushed. And you have a small brain for a man, she said, but there was a softness in her voice that hadn't been there before. But I suppose your heart makes up for the size. Clyde looked stunned. Was that a compliment? Don't get used to it. Martha turned back to work, but she was smiling. And next time you want to compliment me, perhaps avoid comparing parts of my body to hardware equipment. Yes, ma'am. Clyde grinned as if he had won the lottery. Not that I will. I mean, if there is a next time, would you like there to be? Clyde. Martha sighed, but picked up another nail, placing it in position. Hammer. The storm is coming. He hammered but couldn't stop smiling. The storm arrived at nightfall with the fury of a living, angry thing. First came the wind, gusts that shook the entire house, making the windows rattle in their frames even though they were latched. Then the rain, not falling but being thrown horizontally against the walls like handfuls of pebbles. And then the thunder, so loud and close that Clara could feel it in her ribs. They were all gathered in the living room. Martha knitted with forced determination. Clyde sat near her, trying to look brave but jumping at every particularly loud clap of thunder. Levi checked the windows repeatedly, making sure everything was secure. And Clara, sitting on the sofa, tried to pretend she wasn't absolutely terrified. She wasn't afraid of storms. She didn't used to be. In Helena, storms were events observed from inside solid stone houses, with thick walls that muffled the worst sounds. Here, in the wooden house that creaked and groaned with every gust of wind, it felt like the very structure could collapse at any moment. A particularly violent clap of thunder exploded, so close that Clara was sure it hit the house. She jumped, her arms instinctively going around herself. Levi noticed. Without saying anything, he crossed the room and sat down next to her on the sofa. Not touching, but close enough that Clara could feel his warmth, his solidity. I've been through worse, he said, calmly, looking at the fire in the fireplace. When I was 12, a storm tore half the barn roof off. We spent 3 days repairing it in the rain. Clara turned to look at him. 12 years old? My parents had just died. Levi continued, his voice low but firm. Fever. Both of them in less than a week. My older brother Marcus and I were left alone with the ranch. Clara felt something clench in her chest. You had a brother? I did. The tense didn't go unnoticed. Marcus. He was 5 years older, strong, smart. Taught me everything about the ranch after our parents were gone. What happened to him? An accident with a horse 3 years later. Levi was still looking at the fire, but Clara saw the pain in the lines around his eyes. He fell hard and didn't make it. I was 15 and suddenly I was alone with an entire ranch to keep running. Levi. Clara didn't know what to say for a few seconds. I am so very sorry. I'm not telling you to. Feel sorry for me. He finally turned to face her. I'm telling you so you know that storms pass. They always pass. And we fix what breaks, and we keep going. Another clap of thunder shook the house. This time, Clara didn't jump. Instead, she found herself leaning slightly towards Levi, seeking comfort without even realizing it. I never lost anyone, she admitted softly. My mother died when I was born, but I didn't know her, so it's different. And my father, he was always there. But he was also never really there, you know. He gave me everything, money, education, beautiful clothes, and except presence. Loneliness, Levi said, understanding immediately. Yes. Clara felt tears threatening, and this time she didn't fight them. I was surrounded by people all the time. Balls, dinners, events, but always alone. Martha was the only person who truly saw me. And now? Levi asked gently. Do you still feel alone? Clara looked at him. Truly looked. She saw the man who teased her but also defended her, who laughed at her but also admired her, who forced her to be stronger but also offered comfort when she needed it. No, she whispered. I don't feel alone anymore. The distance between them vanished without Clara noticing who moved first. Levi's arm was around her, pulling her against his chest, and she let herself go, resting her head on his shoulder, feeling his steady heartbeat, his warmth, his security. His fingers traced slow, circles on her arm, a gesture so gentle that Clara closed her eyes. "You belong here," Levi murmured against her hair. "You know that, don't you? No matter what the town gossips say, you belong." Clara raised her face and suddenly they were very close, noses almost touching, breaths mingling. Levi's eyes fell to her lips, and Clara saw the question there, the restraint. She began to close the distance, her heart pounding so loud it drowned out even the thunder. And then a violent crash came from the kitchen, followed by indignant clucking. Everyone jumped. Levi leaped up, Clara right behind him. Martha dropped her knitting and Clyde grabbed the shotgun kept near the fireplace. They ran to the kitchen and found an absurd scene. The back door had been forced open by the wind, and 3 wet, indignant chickens had invaded the house, now scratching around the kitchen as if they owned the place. "Damn it!" Levi rushed to close the door, fighting against the wind. "The chickens!" Martha tried to grab one which ran under the table. "Get that one!" Clyde pointed to another, which decided the counter was an excellent perch. Complete chaos ensued. Chickens running, people tripping, Clyde slipping on something Clara preferred not to identify. Martha chasing a chicken around the table like a cartoon. Levi finally managing to close the door and turning around only to take a chicken to the face. Clara, in the middle of it all, started to laugh. She couldn't help it. It was too ridiculous, after all that tension, that almost perfect moment, interrupted by chickens invading the house. Her laughter made the others pause. Levi looked at her, chicken still under his arm, and started to laugh too. Then Martha. Then Clyde, who was sitting on the floor covered in straw. It took another 15 minutes to capture all the chickens and put them in the barn, where they should have been all along. When they finally got back inside, wet and exhausted, the intimate moment had passed. But something had shifted. Clara could feel it. Dawn revealed the damage. The barn had lost part of its roof, boards ripped off by the wind, exposed rafters. Fences were down in 3 different places. The chicken coop door hung on broken hinges, and trees, 2 of them large and old, had fallen near the south field. Levi was outside before the sun was fully up, assessing the damage with a grim expression. Clara found him near the barn, studying the destroyed roof. "How long to fix?" she asked. "Alone? Weeks." He ran a hand through his hair. "With Jake and Clyde, maybe a week. But Jake hurt his leg yesterday helping to secure the horses. Then we get help from town," Clara said simply. "Clara, that will cost—" "I know how much it costs," she interrupted. "And we have the extra money from the cattle sale. Use that." Levi looked at her with something close to awe. "You are incredible, you know that?" Before Clara could answer, the sound of wagons and an automobile approaching made both of them turn. Neighbors, 5, 6 different families, arriving with tools, wood, ropes. Mr. Henderson was there with his sons. Even Jake showed up, limping but determined. And at the end of the line, Marlene Cooper with Annabelle bringing baskets of food. "We heard about the storm," Mr. Henderson said, getting down from his wagon. "We came to help. It's what we do around here." Levi seemed too moved to speak for a moment. Thank you. Thank you very much." "Don't thank us yet," Henderson smiled. "We're going to put you to work too." The morning turned into a day of collective work. Men on the roof, hammering and sawing. Women organizing materials, bringing water and food. Children helping where they could, more getting in the way than helping, but with contagious enthusiasm. And Clara was in the middle of it all. She carried planks, handed out tools, organized supplies, with an efficiency that surprised even herself. Her hands got dirty, her arms ached. Her dress was covered in sawdust, and she didn't care one bit. Marlene watched from afar, her eyes narrowed. Annabelle tried to offer Levi water 3 times, but he was too busy to notice, constantly asking Clara for something, working beside her with a synchronicity that didn't go unnoticed. "Mrs. Dawson is adapting well," Mr. Henderson commented, watching Clara instruct 2 men on where to place, reinforcing rafters with surprising confidence. "She is," Levi agreed, and there was pride in his voice. "She surprises me every day." At midday, Martha and the other women served lunch, Bread, cheese, cold cuts, pies. Everyone sat where they could, eating and talking, laughter mingling with the sound of continued work. Clara found herself sitting on the grass beside Levi, their shoulders touching, sharing a mug of lemonade. "You're covered in sawdust," he observed, smiling. "You're covered in everything," she replied, but she was smiling too. Their eyes met, and there was something new there. Mutual respect, admiration, and something deeper, warmer, that neither of them was ready to name yet. "You belong here," Levi said again, but this time it didn't sound like persuasion. It sounded like a fact, and Clara, looking around at the neighbors working together, at the ranch being rebuilt, at the man beside her who looked at her as if she were extraordinary, realized that maybe he was right. Perhaps she really did belong. 3 weeks after the storm, an invitation arrived. The Alder Ridge Summer Ball, an annual event that was apparently the social occasion of the year for that small community. Clara held the simple paper, so different from the gold-embossed invitations of Helena, and felt something strange, genuine excitement. "Shall we go?" she asked Levi, who was fixing a chair in the living room. He paused, looking at her with surprise. "You want to go?" "Why not?" Clara sat down, studying the invitation. "We've been married for over a month. People will talk anyway. They might as well see that I'm not hiding in shame." Levi smiled slowly. "You're becoming one of us, princess." "Don't call me that." But there was no real venom in the words. On the night of the ball, Clara stood before the small bedroom mirror, evaluating her reflection with critical eyes. The dress was one of the simplest she had brought, deep blue with discreet white lace detailing, a fitted waist and a skirt that allowed movement. Nothing like the elaborate gowns of Helena, but suitable, pretty, without being ostentatious. She had pinned her hair in loose waves, secured on one side with a simple silver comb. Light makeup, just enough to enhance her eyes and give color to her lips. When she descended the stairs, Levi was waiting in the living room, and he stopped completely when he saw her. Clara noticed his breath hitch, his eyes tracing from her hair down to the hem of her dress and back to her face. He was cleanly shaven, wearing a dark suit, the same one from the wedding, but clean and well-pressed. And for the first time since she met him, he seemed genuinely speechless. "You look," he began, his voice husky. "Clara, you look beautiful." It wasn't pretty or presentable. It was beautiful, said with a sincerity that made her face flush. "Thank you," she said, descending the last step. "You look presentable too." He laughed. "Just presentable? Don't let it go to your head." But she was smiling. Martha appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron, Clyde behind her like a faithful shadow. "You two look like a painting," Martha declared with approval. "Now go and have fun, and Clyde, wipe that look of an abandoned dog off your face. You're going with me separately." "I was just about to suggest that," Clyde said quickly, blushing. The trip to town was different from the previous ones. Levi drove the wagon, newly repaired and cleaned for the occasion, and Clara was by his side, not in tense silence, but in comfortable quietude. "I need to warn you," Levi said as Alder Ridge appeared on the horizon. "I'm not a good dancer. In fact, I'm terrible." "How terrible?" "I've stepped on 3 different feet in a single song." Clara laughed, the sound escaping before she could hold it back. "Then it's going to be interesting." The ball was in the community hall, a large wooden building with a polished floor and hanging oil lanterns that cast a warm, golden light. Fiddle and accordion music was already playing when they arrived, and people in their best attire filled the space. Heads turned when Clara and Levi entered together. There were whispers. There were always whispers. But Clara kept her chin up, her hand on Levi's arm with a confidence that wasn't entirely feigned. Mr. Henderson greeted them warmly. Other families who had helped with the barn came to chat. Clara found herself relaxing, genuinely enjoying the simple company, the conversations about harvests and weather, and who had won the pie competition the previous year. Then the music changed to a waltz. Levi turned to her, extending his hand with the expression of someone facing a firing squad. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Dawson?" Clara took his hand, letting him guide her to the center of the floor. They positioned themselves, his hand on her waist, their right hands clasped, and then the music began. Levi was indeed terrible. He stepped on her foot on the first beat, turned the wrong way on the second. On the third, he nearly spun her straight into another couple. "Sorry," he murmured, fierce concentration on his face. "I told you I was bad." Clara, instead of irritation, felt something warm and gentle filling her chest. There was something incredibly touching about seeing this. Man, strong, capable, confident in every aspect of his life, completely out of his element. "You're trying too hard," she said gently. "Let me lead for a moment. A man shouldn't." "Levi," she squeezed his hand. "Let me help." He hesitated, then relaxed marginally. Clara adjusted their rhythm, subtly guiding, and slowly, very slowly, they found something close to synchronicity. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't the kind of dance that would draw attention at Helena balls. But it was theirs, imperfect and real. "You know," Levi said after a few disaster-free bars, "I'm better with horses than with waltzes." Clara laughed, genuine and free, and his head lifted at the sound. "You laugh so little," he said, marveling. "When you truly laugh, it's beautiful." The moment hung between them, the music continuing but the world seeming slower. "I'll teach you to dance," Clara offered impulsively. "Private lessons, but it will cost me one dance a week, every Saturday night, no excuses." Levi smiled, that slow smile that made her stomach churn. "Deal closed," he said. "But I warn you, I'm a difficult student." "I was a difficult student for many things too," she reminded him. "And here I am, milking cows without getting milk in my face. Well, almost without getting any." They laughed together, dancing imperfectly but happily. While around them, the town of Alderridge watched and began to think that maybe, just maybe, this improbable marriage had a real chance. The break brought lemonade and small talk in groups scattered around the hall. Clara was near the refreshment table when she heard the voice, low but carrying the intent to be heard. It must be exhausting to keep up appearances like that. Clara turned. Marlene Cooper was there with two other women, all holding lemonade glasses like civilized weapons. "Excuse me?" Clara kept her voice neutral. "Oh, darling." Marlene smiled, sharp. "We were just commenting on how dedicated you two seem. For a marriage we all know is purely transactional. Didn't your father offer land in exchange for the union?" The words were said loud enough for several people nearby to hear. Conversations paused. Glances shifted. Clara felt heat rise up her neck, but maintained a serene expression. "All marriages start somewhere, Mrs. Cooper." Of course," Marlene waved her hand, feigning casualness. "But they usually start with affection, not contracts. It must be difficult to feign feelings that don't exist." One of the women next to Marlene looked uncomfortable. The other watched Clara with cruel curiosity. "Marlene," the first woman began. "Perhaps it's not. Just being honest," Marlene interrupted, her eyes fixed on Clara. "Annabelle could have offered Levi a real marriage. True love, not convenience. But I suppose land is worth more than feelings to some." Every word was chosen to cut, to humiliate, and it was working. Clara felt pressure behind her eyes, her throat tightening. She wouldn't cry, not here. Not in front of these women who were expecting exactly that. "My wife," Levi's voice cut through the air like a whip, "is worth more than all the gossip in this town put together." Absolute silence fell. Levi had materialized next to Clara, his expression more serious than she had ever seen. There was no humor there, none of his usual relaxation. There was controlled anger and steely determination. "Levi," Marlene tried to smile but faltered under his gaze. "I wasn't." "You were," he interrupted, his voice low but carrying through the silence. "And I'm going to say this once, for everyone to hear." He turned, addressing not just Marlene but the entire hall. "Clara is my wife. She works by my side every day. She learns things she never needed to know. She faces challenges without complaint. And she does all of it with more courage than most of you would have." Clara looked at him, her heart pounding so loud she could barely hear over the sound. "So if anyone has a problem with my marriage," Levi continued, looking directly at Marlene, "you can bring it straight to me. Leave my wife alone." He took Clara's hand, lacing their fingers together with protective firmness, and guided her back to the center of the hall where the music was restarting. People moved aside, opening a path. Marlene stood still, her face red with humiliation, while Her friend murmured something about perhaps leaving early. When Levi and Clara reached the center of the floor, he turned her to face him. "Sorry," he said softly. "I should have stopped her sooner." "You don't need to defend me," Clara whispered, but emotion was breaking her voice. "I can handle Marlene Cooper." "I know you can," Levi squeezed her hand. "But you shouldn't have to handle her alone. Not when I'm here." Clara blinked rapidly, fighting back tears that weren't from sadness, but from something far more complicated. "Did you mean it?" she asked. "What you said? About her working by your side, about it being real?" Levi's eyes met hers, and there was no lie there. Only raw, slightly frightening truth. "Every word," he said simply. The music played around them. People danced, talked. The life of the ball continued. But for Clara and Levi, it felt like only that moment existed. That look, that truth suspended between them like something precious and fragile. "Dance with me?" Levi asked. "For real this time." And Clara did. And this time when he stepped on her foot, they both laughed, and the sound was free and happy and completely real. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She was lying in bed, her side, because yes, they now had defined sides, although the pillow barrier had gradually disappeared over the last few weeks, looking at the wooden ceiling, processing everything that had happened at the ball. Marlene's words, Levi's defense, the way he had looked at her. Real, he had said, every word. Her heart wouldn't stop racing every time she replayed it. Finally giving up on sleep, Clara got up, put her robe over her nightgown, and silently went downstairs. Maybe fresh air would help clear her confused head. The porch was bathed in moonlight, the cool night air carrying the scent of grass and wildflowers. Clara sat in the rocking chair, pulling her knees to her chest, and just breathed. Can't sleep. Either. She jumped. Levi was in the doorway, holding 2 steaming mugs, his hair messy from sleep, wearing only trousers and an unbuttoned shirt. "You scared me," she accused, her hand on her chest. "Sorry." He offered one of the mugs. "Brought coffee. Thought we'd need it." Clara took it, grateful for the warmth in her cold hands. Levi sat in the chair next to her, and for a few moments they just drank coffee in comfortable silence. "You defended my honor today," Clara said. "Finally. No one has ever done that before." "Your father never?" "My father loved me in his way." Clara looked into the mug, but he didn't understand why words hurt. He said I was too sensitive, that I should ignore gossip, as if it were that simple. "It's not simple," Levi agreed. Words cut, sometimes deeper than anything else. They were quiet again, the rocker creaking softly. "In the beginning," Levi began, his voice low, "it was just business. I needed help to keep the ranch after 2 bad years. Your father offered a deal that solved my problem. You needed to escape a worse marriage. It made practical sense." Clara turned to look at him, her heart speeding up. "In the beginning," she agreed carefully. "But now," Levi put down his mug, running a hand through his hair in a gesture Clara had learned meant he was nervous. "Now I wake up every day and my first thought is whether you're awake yet. Whether you'll be in the kitchen trying to make coffee. Which is much better now, by the way. Whether you'll surprise me with something new you've learned or with some sharp observation that makes me laugh." Clara held her breath. "And at night," he continued, looking at his own hands, "I lie in that bed next to you, listening to you breathe, and I keep thinking about how completely my life has changed. How you've changed everything. I fall asleep thinking about your laugh, the way you wrinkle your nose when you're concentrating. How beautiful you looked covered in sawdust, organizing the barn reconstruction." He finally turned, meeting her eyes. "This wasn't in the agreement, Clara. No clause mentioned that I was going to fall in love with you." The world stopped. Clara felt tears, real, genuine, welling up in her eyes. "Fall in love?" she whispered. "Completely," he confirmed, his voice husky. "In a way that scares me a little, to be honest." Clara put down her own mug with slightly trembling hands. There were 1,000 things she wanted to say, 1,000 feelings crashing in her chest, but only one truth mattered. "Me too," she said, her voice breaking. "I thought it was just adaptation, making the best of a bad situation, but it's not that. Levi, I wake up looking for you. My whole day revolves around being near you. And when you touch me or smile that way or call me princess even when I asked you not to, she laughed through the tears. I can't imagine being anywhere else. Levi got up, pulling her up too, his hands framing her face with a tenderness that stole her breath. Clara Dawson, he said, and the full name sounded so right. Can I kiss you? For real this time? Without chickens interrupting or Martha walking in with tea? Clara laughed, tears streaming freely now, but they were happy tears. If you don't kiss me, I'm going to have to do it myself. And where's the romance in that? He smiled, and then finally, he closed the distance between them. The kiss was slow, deep, full of all the promise that had been building since the first challenging look at the Hastings mansion dinner. Clara's hands went up to his shoulders, her fingers lacing into the hair at the nape of his neck. Levi's arms pulled her closer, one hand firm on her back, the other still framing her face, as if she were too precious to hold with less care. It was everything Clara never knew she wanted. Urgent but gentle, passionate but reverent, perfect in its imperfection. When they finally broke apart, breathless, foreheads touching, eyes closed, the world felt more right. I'm still terrible at dancing, Levi murmured. Clara laughed against his lips. But you kiss very well, so it makes up for it. I'm going to need more practice, he teased, to ensure I maintain the standard. I think that can be arranged. Clara agreed and kissed him again and again until the stars began to fade with the first sign of dawn. And when they finally went inside to sleep the few remaining hours of the night, it was entwined, with no pillows dividing the space, just the two of them, and the truth finally admitted. This was no longer a marriage of convenience. It was love, real, complicated, imperfect, and completely theirs. 3 days after the kiss on the porch, 3 days of stolen smiles, hands accidentally meeting during work, and a new happiness Clara was still learning to trust. The mailman brought a letter. Clara recognized it immediately by the expensive paper and her father's company seal. Her stomach clenched as she opened the envelope with a butter knife, right there in the kitchen, Martha preparing bread dough in the background. Her father's elaborate handwriting filled the single page. Clara, I've given this experiment enough time. I hope you've learned to value what you had. I am prepared to annul the marriage. My lawyers have already handled the legal details. You can return home, re-establish your social position, marry appropriately. I have deposited $50,000 into an account under your name at the Helena Bank. More than enough to start a new life, should you prefer. Far from Montana, far from complications. You don't have to keep pretending, dear. I know that life isn't for you. Send a response by telegram. I will come fetch you. Your father. Clara's hands trembled. $50,000. It was a fortune. It was complete. Freedom? It was everything any sensible woman would desire. It was everything she no longer wanted. Bad news? Martha asked, noticing her expression. No. Clara folded the letter quickly, slipping it into her apron pocket. Just my father being my father. She didn't see Levi standing in the back doorway, having entered silently, shaking mud from his boots. She didn't see how his eyes had caught the expensive paper, the seal, the look on Clara's face. She didn't see when he turned and walked out again, something closing off in his chest. The rest of the day, Levi was strange. Clara noticed it at lunch. He ate quickly, answered in monosyllables, avoided her gaze. When she tried to talk about fixing the fence on the east field, he just nodded and left. What's wrong with him? Clara asked Clyde, who was mending a saddle on the porch. Clyde looked uncomfortable. The boss has his ways, ma'am. Sometimes he gets thoughtful. That's not thoughtful. Clara crossed her arms. That's distant, cold. Maybe he needs space, Clyde suggested unconvincingly. Clara went up to the bedroom, searching for where she had left the letter. She wanted to reread it, to plan the perfect response that would make it clear to her father that she had made her choice. The letter wasn't where she had left it, in the pocket of the apron she had hung on the chair. She searched the dresser, the drawers, under the papers. Nothing. And then she realized the window was slightly ajar, but the wind couldn't have taken something from inside the pocket. Someone took it. Levi, he had read it, and he had gotten everything wrong. Clara found him in the barn late in the afternoon, mechanically feeding the horses, his back tense. "You took my letter." It wasn't a question. Levi didn't turn around. "It was in your apron pocket. I saw it when it fell. I just put it away." "Liar." Clara walked in, closing the door behind her. "You read it." He finally turned, and the high expression was too controlled, too guarded. "I read it," he admitted, "and I understand." "Understand what?" "That your father is offering you a way out, back to the life you know. Money. Freedom." His voice was neutral, but Clara saw tension in his jaw. "I don't blame you for wanting to accept." Clara felt anger ignite, hot and fierce. "Are you going to judge me without asking what I think? What is there to ask?" Levi threw hay with unnecessary force. $50,000, Clara. It's a fortune, more than I can offer in many lifetimes. "So it's about money?" She stepped forward. "Do you think I'm that shallow?" "It's not about being shallow." His voice rose for the first time. "It's about being realistic. Look around." He gestured to the barn, the ranch, everything. "This is what I have to offer. Hard work, cows, land that sometimes yields, sometimes doesn't. I can't give you balls every week or expensive dresses or trips to Europe. I can't compete with what your father offers. I didn't ask you to compete, but you should." Levi ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "You deserve more than this. More than waking up before the sun to milk cows. More than calloused hands and dust-covered dresses. More than me." The silence that followed was broken only by their heavy breathing. Clara felt tears of anger, or hurt, or both, burning. "You stubborn idiot," she said, her voice trembling. "A complete idiot." "Clara, no!" She stepped forward, poking his chest with her finger. "Do you think I don't know what I want? Do you think I want luxury? That I want to go back to that empty life where no one really sees me? Where I'm just a porcelain doll to be admired and decorate rooms? You would have comfort. I want you," she burst out. "You stubborn idiot, I want you. I want to wake up in your messy bed. I want to argue about how to make coffee. I want you to laugh at my cooking attempts and teach me new things. I want your kisses on the porch and your hands in mine and your laugh when I say something sharp. I want a man who truly sees me, not my bank account or my last name or what I can do for him socially." She was crying now, tears streaming freely, but she didn't care. "And if you don't understand that," she continued, her voice breaking, "if you think $50,000 is worth more than what we've built, then maybe you really don't know me at all." She turned to leave, but Levi caught her arm. "Wait, let go of me." She pulled, but he held firm, not hurting her but preventing her escape. "Clara, I don't want to hear it." She looked at him, eyes blazing with tears and anger. "You decided for me. You decided I would choose money, that I couldn't really love you. 3 days, Levi. 3 days since you said you were falling in love with me. And at the first difficulty, the first chance for me to leave, you're already pushing me out." The truth hit Levi like a punch. Clara saw it on his face. Comprehension, horror, regret. I was scared," he admitted, his voice low. "Scared you'd realize you could do better, that you deserve better. And you decided for me," Clara repeated, tired now. How romantic. She walked out of the barn before he could respond, leaving him alone with the horses and the weight of his own stupid pride. Outside, Martha was on the porch, peeling potatoes with an efficiency that came from decades of practice when Clyde approached. She saw him from the corner of her eye, adjusting his hat, wiping his hands on his trousers, silently rehearsing something. It was simultaneously adorable and pathetic. "Something you need, Clyde?" she asked without lifting her eyes from the potatoes. Yes, no, maybe," he coughed. "Martha, can I talk to you?" "You are talking." "Right. Yes." He sat on the edge of the porch, hat in his hands. "It's just, I've been thinking. Dangerous," Martha commented, but there was humor in her voice. "Martha, you are..." Clyde paused, clearly struggling with words. "You are you don't annoy me as much as other women." Martha finally stopped, turning slowly to face him. "Excuse me?" Clyde blushed violently. "No, I mean yes, but I meant it in a good way. You annoy me sometimes, but it's like, good annoyance? That makes me want to be better?" And you're pretty when you're annoyed. And when you're not too, and I like it when scold me because it means you're paying attention to me and… Clyde, Martha interrupted. Are you trying to court me? Yes. He stood up abruptly. Very badly, clearly. But yes, Martha, you are the most extraordinary woman I've met. You are smart and strong, and you don't take my nonsense, and you make the best bread I've ever tasted, and when you smile it's like the sun coming out after a storm. Martha blinked, genuinely surprised. That was almost poetic. Was it? Clyde looked hopeful. I practiced. Several times. With the horses. They didn't mind. Martha let out a laugh, real, free, and Clyde smiled as if he had won a prize. Clyde, she said, putting down the bowl of potatoes. You are clumsy. You talk nonsense half the time, and you have questionable table manners. His smile faltered. Oh, but, she continued, standing up and moving closer. You are also kind, hardworking, loyal, and you make me laugh when I'm not expecting it. And that ridiculous declaration you just made is the most romantic thing an ass has ever said to me. So, is that a yes? Maybe I need more convincing. Martha raised an eyebrow. Clyde understood the challenge. He took a step forward, hesitant, giving her time to back away. She didn't. When he kissed her, it was awkward and sweet, his large hands framing her face with care as if she were fine china, which was hilarious considering Martha was one of the most practical and resilient women. In Montana, when they separated, both were blushing. That was, Clyde started. Adequate, Martha finished, but she was smiling. Now get back to work before I change my mind. Yes, ma'am. He practically floated down the steps. Martha returned to her potatoes but couldn't stop smiling. Love happened in the strangest places, at the most unexpected times, with the most improbable people, and it was perfect that way. 2 days later, Mr. Hastings arrived in his automobile, a sleek, black gleaming Model A Ford, brutally contrasting with the rural setting of the ranch. Clara saw him from the bedroom window, where she had spent the last 48 hours avoiding Levi with almost impressive dedication. Her heart clenched, not with relief or happiness, but with preparation for battle. She walked down the stairs, went out the front door, and found her father stepping out of the automobile with the posture of someone arriving to rescue a prisoner. Clara, he opened his arms. I've come for you, dear. I didn't ask to be fetched, she replied, standing on the last step of the porch. Mr. Hastings paused, frowning. Did you receive my letter? I did. And? Did you send the telegram? No. Clara crossed her arms. I won't accept your money. I won't annul my marriage. I'm not going anywhere. Her father blinked, clearly not expecting resistance. Clara, be sensible. You did your part. You proved your point. But you don't have to continue this farce. Farce? Clara stepped off the last step, moving closer. Father, for the first time in my life, nothing I do is a farce. I work for real. I get my hands dirty. I learn useful things. And I love a man who sees me beyond pretty clothes and good manners. You can't love someone you barely know. I know him better than I knew any of the suitable suitors you paraded in front of me, she interrupted. I know how he wakes up before the sun, how he laughs when something genuinely surprises him, how he treats his animals with respect and his workers with dignity, how he challenges me to be better, but also accepts me when I fail. Her words came faster now, more passionate. I've learned more about myself in these months than I learned in years of luxury and superficiality in Helena. Clara, no, father. She took the letter from her apron pocket. This is your answer. She walked over to the fireplace that Martha had lit in the living room earlier, and without hesitation, tossed the letter into the fire. The expensive paper caught fire immediately, ashes rising up the chimney, taking the offer of escape with them. Mr. Hastings watched, dumbfounded. You are making a mistake. No. Clara turned to him, and there was absolute certainty in her voice. The mistake would be letting fear of hard work push me away from the only man who has made me feel alive, who has made me truly laugh, who makes me want to be better, not to impress society, but to impress myself. And if he can't give you the life you deserve, he already has, Clara said simply. He gave me purpose, he gave me challenge, he gave me true love, even when it's imperfect and complicated. That is the life I deserve, Father. Not your $50,000. Heavy silence fell between them, then surprisingly, Mr. Hastings smiled. Small but genuine. You've grown up? He said softly. Finally grown up. I had a good teacher. Clara softened. You taught me to be strong. Just took time to learn what true strength is. Mr. Hastings pulled her into a hug. Rare, brief, but significant. Be happy then, he murmured. That's all that truly matters. When he pulled away, Clara saw movement out of the corner of her eye. Levi was near the barn, clearly having heard everything, his expression mixing guilt, admiration, and something that looked a lot like desperate hope. Their eyes met across the distance. Clara didn't go to him. Not yet. He needed to come to her. He needed to choose to fight for this, not just passively accept her decision. Mr. Hastings left after a quick farewell, promising to visit in the winter. When the automobile disappeared over the horizon in a cloud of dust, Clara stood alone on the porch, waiting. A few minutes later, that felt like hours, Levi crossed the yard. He walked up the steps. He stopped in front of her. I was an idiot, he said without preamble. You were, Clara agreed. A complete, stubborn, insecure idiot. Yes, and you deserved better than that. You deserved trust. You deserved for me to fight, not to push you away. I did. Clara kept her voice steady, despite the threatening tears. Levi knelt down, right there on the porch, in front of anyone who wanted to see. Clara Dawson, he said, taking her hands. I'm asking you not to marry me because we already are. I'm asking you to give me a second chance, to trust that I've learned, that I will never doubt us again, no matter how scared I get. Clara looked down at this proud, strong man, kneeling, vulnerable, honest. Get up, she said softly. He obeyed, uncertainty in his eyes. Clara took his face in her hands. Promise me you'll never decide for me again. Never assume I want something different from what I say. I promise, one without hesitation. Promise to fight for us, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard, with every breath I have. Then, Clara smiled through the tears. Yes. Yes to a second chance. Yes to us. Yes to everything. He kissed her right there on the porch with Martha peeking through the kitchen window and Clyde watching from the barn, both smiling like the love-struck fools they were. And when they finally separated, Levi whispered against her lips, I love you, princess. I will always love you. I love you too, Clara replied. My stubborn ass. It was imperfect. It was complicated. It was real. And it was theirs. Autumn of 1936. Dawson Ranch. 4 years. 4 years. Since Clara Hastings, now Clara Dawson so permanently that sometimes she forgot she had ever been anyone else, arrived at that ranch thinking her life was over. 4 years, and there she was, sitting on the porch on a golden October afternoon, with her husband sprawled in a chair, his bare foot in her lap, while she tried to remove a stubborn jigger with a sterilized needle and rapidly dwindling patience. Stop moving, Clara commanded, holding his foot firmly. You're worse than... child. You are sticking a needle into my foot. Levi defended himself, trying to pull away. It's my right to complain. Your right was to wear boots when you went to check the south fence. She poked harder than necessary, making him jump. But no, the great Levi Dawson thinks he's invincible. Ouch. He grimaced. You did that on purpose. I did, she admitted sweetly. And I'll do it again if you don't keep still. Levi looked at her with that expression that still, after all these years, made something clench in her chest. Half exasperation, half pure admiration. You know, he said, relaxing marginally, when I agreed to marry you, I thought I was getting a wife, not an army sergeant disguised as a beautiful woman. Should have read the fine print in the contract. Clara located the parasite, extracting it with surgical precision that would have made her childhood embroidery teacher proud. Who knew those lessons would have a practical application? Done. You survived the surgery. My hero, Levi said sarcastically, but his fingers found hers, squeezing with genuine gratitude. What would I do without you? You'd probably die of stubbornness infection. She wiped the needle, putting it away in the sewing box. Or eat your own burned eggs. Hey, my eggs have improved. They're still awful, Clara smiled. But I love you anyway. How generous. He pulled his foot back, slipping his boot on. Charitable. Princess, accepting the flaws of her rancher husband. "Don't call me princess." But there was no real venom in the words. There never was any more. "Doll?" Even worse. "My love?" Clara paused, looking at him. Even after 4 years, there were still moments where the impact of having him, truly having him, not by contract but by choice, hit her like a punch to the stomach. "That one will do," she said softly. Levi smiled, that slow smile he had perfected over the years, and pulled her closer, stealing a kiss that started soft and quickly deepened until, "Daddy, Mommy, the pig ate my hat." They separated, laughing, as a tornado of pure energy in the form of a 2.5-year-old boy invaded the porch. Thomas Dawson, Tommy to everyone who knew him, little monster to Levi in moments of particular chaos, had messy dark hair like his father and piercing blue eyes like his mother, and the stubbornness of both multiplied by 10. The pig doesn't eat hats. "Tommy," Levi said, picking up his son and placing him on his lap. "Pigs eat, well, almost everything, actually. Maybe the pig did eat your hat." "Levi," Clara elbowed him. "Don't encourage him. Mr. Piggy is mean," Tommy declared with the seriousness of a judge pronouncing sentence. "Very, very mean. Mr. Piggy weighs 200 pounds and you left your hat on the floor of the pig pen." Clara adjusted her son's hair, removing a leaf caught in it. "What did we learn about leaving things on the ground?" Tommy thought seriously for 3 whole seconds. "That Mr. Piggy will eat them." Clara and Levi exchanged looks. "Technically correct. Go wash your hands for dinner," Clara instructed. "And don't stop on the way to play with the chickens." "Okay, Mommy." Tommy jumped off Levi's lap and ran off, clearly planning to stop precisely to play with the chickens. "He's not going to wash his hands, is he?" Levi asked. "No," Clara agreed. "But Martha will. Catch him. She has a radar for dirty children." As if summoned, Martha's voice echoed from the house. "Thomas Dawson, away from those chickens. Bath, now." "How did you know?" came Tommy's indignant shout. "I know everything," Martha replied. "I am psychic and omniscient, and I'm telling your father." Levi chuckled, pulling Clara back close to him, his arm around her waist. 4 years, he said, looking out at the surrounding fields. 4 years, and it still feels surreal. Sometimes. Clara followed his gaze. The ranch had prospered in ways neither of them had imagined. The barn, rebuilt after the storm, now had a new storage annex. The fields yielded better than ever. They had bought more land to the north, and Clara, using the business knowledge inherited from her father, had established supply contracts with 3 neighboring towns. "Sometimes I still wake up thinking I'm in Helena," she admitted. "Then I hear you snoring next to me and I remember where I am." "I don't snore," Levi protested. "Yes, you do, like a hibernating bear." "Liar." But he was smiling. "You're the one who talks in your sleep." "I do not." "Yes, you do. Yesterday you spent 10 minutes arguing with someone about the price of hay. Right in your dream. Winning the argument, I might add." Clara flushed slightly. "Well, Henderson was trying to overcharge us." "Love." Levi turned her to face him, his hands framing her face. "You argue about business even. In your sleep. It's simultaneously adorable and terrifying." Before Clara could answer, Martha appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on an apron that had seen better days. "Dinner in 20 minutes, she announced. "Tommy is minimally clean, although he tried to negotiate skipping the bath. He argued that pigs don't bathe and they're fine. I don't know where he gets these ideas." Clara and Levi exchanged guilty glances. It had definitely been Levi who made that observation last week. "And Clyde?" Clara asked, hiding a smile. "Trying to fix the back fence." Martha rolled her eyes, but there was clear affection there. "Said he had a system. 3 minutes later, I heard the sound of something falling and curses I thank God Tommy didn't hear." "Is he okay?" Levi stood up, worried. "He's fine, just his ego is hurt." Martha waved her hand. "And possibly his big toe. I'll check in a minute. First, I need to make sure the roast doesn't burn because someone—" She looked pointedly at Clara. "Was too distracted removing jiggers to check the oven when I asked." "Sorry, Martha," Clara said, not looking the least bit repentant. Martha turned to go inside, but paused. "Oh, and Clara," Your father sent a telegram, arriving tomorrow for a visit bringing important news. I hope it's not another suitor he wants you to evaluate for some distant cousin. He did that one time, Clara defended, and the poor girl almost married that man who collected dead butterflies, Martha reminded her. Even you admitted that was a lapse in judgment. In my defense, he seemed normal on paper. Martha just sighed and disappeared inside. Levi pulled Clara back into his arms. Your father's coming tomorrow, he said. Does that mean I need to wear my good suit? You have a good suit? Clara teased. I do. It's the same one from our wedding. It just has a few new stains, and maybe a small hole where Tommy decided it was a good idea to use scissors. My God! Clara buried her face in his chest, laughing. We are disasters. We are perfect, Levi corrected, kissing the top of her head. Perfect disasters. Across the yard, Clyde was indeed trying to fix the fence, and failing spectacularly. The board he was nailing snapped in half the exact moment he hammered. The hammer, in motion with too much force, continued its trajectory and struck his big toe with cruel precision. Son of a... He stopped, remembering Tommy might be nearby. Very rude mare. Trouble, dear, came Martha's voice, carrying a bucket of water and rags. Clyde turned, still holding his foot, balancing on one leg like a particularly clumsy heron. The fence hates me, he declared. It's a conspiracy. The boards refuse to cooperate. Or, Martha suggested, setting down the bucket and approaching. You keep using the hammer as if you're killing a snake, not nailing wood. My method is efficient. Your method is violent and uncoordinated. She took the hammer from his hand. Let me do it. Martha, you don't need to... Clyde, she interrupted him, picking up a new board and nail. In 4 years of marriage, how many times have you managed to fix a fence without breaking something? Yours or the fence's? Clyde thought seriously. Twice? Once, Martha corrected. And I was holding the board for you, so technically it was teamwork. She positioned the board, aligned the nail, and, with 3 precise hammer strokes, fixed it perfectly. There, see? Technique, not brute force. Clyde looked at her with that expression he still wore, awe mixed with something close to adoration. You're amazing, he said, as he had said 1,000 times in the last 4 years. I am, Martha agreed, but she was smiling. And you're terrible with tools, but you have other qualities. I do? Clyde brightened. What are they? Well, you... Martha paused, thinking. You're loyal and kind, and you make Tommy laugh, and you make good coffee now. Took 3 years, but I learned, and... Martha continued, turning to face him fully. You still look at me as if I'm young and beautiful, even when my hair is full of flour and I'm covered in bread dough. Because you are young and beautiful, Clyde said with absolute sincerity. And when you're covered in flour, you're even more beautiful because it means there will be fresh bread, and I love your bread. More than anything in the world. Except you, I love you more than bread. But it's a close contest. Martha let out a laugh. That laugh Clyde had worked 4 years to provoke frequently. You're ridiculous, she said. I'm yours, ridiculous. He leaned in, taking her hands. Forever, forever, she agreed, and kissed him right there, in the middle of the yard, with chickens watching and Tommy peeking from the window yelling, "Ew!" with all the enthusiasm of a 2-year-old. Dinner was, as always, a combination of chaos and affection. Tommy refused to eat carrots, arguing that bunnies eat carrots and I'm not a bunny. Levi tried to explain that humans also ate carrots. Tommy countered that then Levi should eat all the carrots to prove it. Levi, cornered by his own logic, had to eat Tommy's carrots. Clara watched it all with poorly disguised amusement. Martha and Clyde debated whether the pie was overbaked. It's perfect. It's perfectly burnt. If you don't like it, don't eat it. I didn't say I won't eat it, I'm going to eat 3 slices. And when Tommy finally went to bed, after negotiating 15 more minutes of play, 5 stories instead of 2, and permission to take his toy horse to sleep, Clara and Levi found themselves alone on the porch again. The stars shone with impossible intensity. The air was cool, carrying the promise of approaching winter, and everything was quiet, except for the occasional rustle of wind in the trees. Your father is coming tomorrow, Levi said, pulling her closer, wrapping his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on the top of her head. Do you think it's good news or bad news? With my father, Clara relaxed against him. It could be anything. From I sold the mining company to I bought an elephant and need a place to keep it. Levi chuckled, the sound reverberating through his chest to her back. If he brings an elephant, Tommy will be ecstatic. Don't give him ideas. But Clara was smiling. They stayed like that for a long moment, just existing together, their breaths synchronized, as they had for 4 years, as they planned to do for the next 40. The silence was comfortable, full of everything that didn't need to be said, but there was something in the air, that expectant stillness that came before important words. You know, Levi said finally, his voice low. I've been thinking. Dangerous, Clara teased, but there was tenderness there. The ranch is growing. We bought more land this year. Profits are better than ever. He paused, his fingers tracing slow circles on her back. Tommy is going to need help managing all this one day. Clara tilted her head, curious. Help? Siblings, Levi said simply. At least 5 more. Clara nearly choked. 5? Or 6? He had that glint in his eyes, half serious, half teasing. A big family brings joy, and someone needs to help run this empire we're building. Levi Dawson. Clara turned fully in his arms. Are you suggesting I spend the next 10 years pregnant? Not entirely, he smiled. We'd have some breaks, for your recovery, and for us to spend more time together, making more cute little things that are half you, half me. He smiled, amused and teasing, but there was something in the way he said it, that mix of humor and sincerity, of teasing and promise, that made Clara's heart clench. Do you really want that? She asked softly. More children, more chaos. I want you, Levi said, and the simplicity of the statement stole her breath. I want our life, our family, and yes, I want to fill this house with laughter and mess, and tiny terrors who are stubborn like you and overly confident like me. Clara laughed, tears threatening for no particular reason other than pure happiness. You paint a tempting picture. And, he continued, his hands moving up to frame her face, you are a wonderful mother. Tommy is lucky, and I am lucky. So why not share that luck with a few more? How romantic. But she was smiling. Levi reached into his pocket, and when he pulled it out, there was a small, dark blue velvet box. Clara held her breath. Levi, what is this? From the last cattle sale, he explained, opening the box. Profit was good, very good, and I thought, my wife deserves something beautiful. Inside, a delicate brooch, silver crafted in the shape of a lavender flower with small blue stones that sparkled in the starlight. It was refined, elegant, exactly the kind of jewelry Clara loved but would never ask for. It's beautiful, she whispered, her fingers touching the piece with reverence. But you didn't have to. Yes, I did, he interrupted, taking out the brooch and carefully pinning it to the collar of her dress. Because you can have the strength of a lioness when you need to. His fingers brushed softly against her neck. You can negotiate with traders and manage accounts and remove jiggers with great skill. But you're still my doll, the princess of my heart, and I like to spoil you. Clara touched the brooch, then looked at him, and everything she wanted to say got stuck in her throat. So she simply pulled him down, kissing him with everything she felt. Gratitude, love, the promise of all the years to come. When they parted, she buried her face in his neck and whispered, 2. 2 more children, she clarified, her eyes shining. Not 5, 2 is reasonable, negotiable. 3, he immediately counteroffered. 2.5, she laughed. How do you have half a child? Exactly my point. Clara kissed him again. 2, we're agreed. We'll see, Levi said with that slow, devastating smile. I have my persuasion techniques. I'm sure you do. She rested her head on his shoulder, looking out at the moonlit fields. But for now, this is perfect. You, me, Tommy, this life we've built. It is, he agreed, his arms tightening around her. More than perfect. The stars shone above. The wind whispered through the trees. And there, on the porch of the ranch that had once seemed like a prison but was now home, Clara Dawson, who had arrived thinking her life was over and discovered it was only just beginning, closed her eyes and smiled. Not for the jewelry, though it was beautiful. Not for the promise of more children, though it warmed her heart. But for this moment, this man, this improbable and imperfect life that was richer than any fortune her father could offer. "I love you," she said simply. "I know," Levi replied, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "You chose me, after all. Best decision you ever made." "Second best," Clara corrected, raising her face to look at him. "What was the first?" "Learning to make coffee properly," she smiled at his expression. "So you'd stop complaining every morning." Levi laughed. That laugh she loved, free and genuine, and spun her around, dancing without music under the Montana stars. And as they twirled, Clara thought about how funny it is that sometimes the most perfect endings start with the most unlikely beginnings. How sometimes the life you choose is better than any life you planned. The rooster would crow in the morning. The chaos would resume. Life would continue with its beautiful, disorganized mess. But now, in this perfect, stolen moment, everything was exactly as it should be. Everything was good. Everything was right. Everything was home. So, would you stay with the stubborn rancher, or accept going back to a life of luxury? If you like the story, comment doll. And if you are also on the team that loves stories with sharp banter and happy endings, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. You can also help us reach further by sharing the story and clicking the hype button. I promise the next story will have even more teasing and romance.